Cami.
That's okay.
Hey, Mel,
Yes.
did you get the minutes?
Yeah, I skipped the minutes. Let's sorry about that. Sure, let's do the approval of the May minutes here before we hear from the division.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Second by Mr. Singletary. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, same sign. Okay, hearing none, the May minutes have been approved. Thank you, Chuck. Okay, now on to no continuances or withdrawals, and we'll do the executive and division reports.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board, Director Brandon, good morning. Tim Bach, Deputy Director, Department of Natural Resources. A couple updates here. It's that time of year where we are formalizing wildly important goals for the upcoming fiscal year that begins on July 1st, most of which we are rolling over previous year's WIGs that you're familiar with, balancing conservation and recreation, finding new revenue streams for Colorado Parks and Wildlife, continuing the completion of the water plan update, which will actually have a draft released at the end of this month for public review, and then will be finalized at the end of the year. And then also we're working on a cabinet level WIG on
sorry, they call me from state of Colorado regarding reclamation.
Wildfire mitigation. With that, on the state land board here at its June 16th meeting, commissioners approved extending a planning lease for geothermal exploration in Chieftain County. They also continue to explore carbon sequestration leasing opportunities. We've got phase 1 of a research project that the Colorado School of Mines completed, which identifies key geologic formations and structures that are appropriate for carbon storage, and then created a model for estimating that carbon storage and developed a ranking system for state land board properties in terms of carbon storage potential. The state land board also will be closing the fiscal year 22 books soon. And right now it looks like revenues will likely be exceeding $177 million earned as a result of royalties paid on high oil and gas market prices. On the Colorado Parks and Wildlife, they have newly renovated a campground at Crawford State Park in time for the Pioneer Days Festival weekend. This work includes now, which was once a primitive campground, now 20 full hookup campsites for recreational vehicles near Delta, Colorado. On to the Division of Forestry, Colorado State Forest Service. They are now accepting applications for the Forest Legacy Program through June 15th. The program authorizes the State Forest Service or the U.S. Forest Service to purchase permanent conservation easements, contribute fee acquisitions on private forest lands to prevent those lands from being converted to non-forest uses. State Forest Service is also working in Summit County right now to assist landowners with project development grant oversight on 12 hazardous fuel reduction and community wildfire protection plan implementation grants right now. The project will complete over 160 defensible spaces and treat 170 acres in the WUI and create plans for neighborhood home ignition zone management, improve egress routes. Colorado Geographic Naming Board met in May. We are going to be meeting every other month for the remainder of the year and continue to focus on geographic features with derogatory names with the goal of taking up consideration of renaming Mount Evans by the end of the year. Right now, we've had a list of about 31 naming proposals. We hope to get those down to 8 going into 2023. Our co-swap program with DNR, Wildfire Action Program, Workforce Development Grant Update. We have spent $4.5 million on a total of 33 projects. 1 million of those allocated to internal DNR workforce development projects, another 3.4 million for external workforce development projects. This is working with Colorado Youth Corps on private and public lands. And then the Oil and Gas Commission submitted an application to the Department of Interior for our federal funding to plug, remediate, and reopen wells and sites. Request for about $25 million, and we'll learn in close to September here whether or not we have received that. And that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay. Ms. Brannon?
Yes. Hello, good morning. The pollen's not a friend of mine either now. So yeah, just a couple of things. Once again, here we are with coal mine fires. We've got one outside of Paonia. It's very near the West Elk mine. So it's tricky because it's underground and it's been daylighting. And then when it daylights, it's got food with the vegetation all around it and all around where it's daylighting. So we hired a contractor, and I think they'll be finished this week to clear out the vegetation and sort of secure the area. It's awkward because it's a really, really steep slope. So we put it out for bid and we only got one. I mean, that made that selection pretty easy. But yeah, contractors just weren't all that anxious to do. It was a complicated job. But that's almost finished. Speaking of which, the infrastructure funding, the guidance did come out. Guidance. It's not guidance. It's guidance in places, but it's also, it reads more like mandates in other places, not just guidance. And some of the mandates are highly prescriptive and not in concert with our procurement rules and such. So, like you can only, laid off coal miners can be considered. Well, we can't be that prescriptive. The fact of the matter is, lay off coal miners will likely get the jobs because they're perfectly suited for them, but they're not a protected class. And so we cannot, do some of the things that the Office of Service Mining would have us do. All of the states are a united front on this, from Colorado to Pennsylvania. We're all basically singing in unison on, our response to some of it. So we think OSM is listening. And so we hope that some of that will get ironed out. But yeah, we'd like the guidance to be, just that, and then move forward with the money and with the projects, especially coal mine fires, that we can do with that money. We successfully completed a year with our Rupe kids. We get 4 kids, 1 freshman, sophomore, 1 junior, 1 senior. It was maybe not the best year because of people not being in the office as much and so forth, but we cobbled along, and our senior that was with us is now back with us as a temporary employee for pay this summer. So Raquel is become part of the DRMS family. So yeah, so we're looking forward to having another crop back this coming fall, and that promises to be a more robust work study program because people will be here, and we're back. We're back in the office. Everybody's under a flex place agreement, and that those agreements is no less than 2 days a week in the office. So yeah, so looking forward to that, and I don't know, the sublime days of summer. With that, I'll take any questions or comments if you have any. Okay.
All right. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Russ, did you have anything, or you good?
No, I don't have anything at this time. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Okay, so we have three major agenda items here. The first one, number 5, is an enforcement hearing, should take about 20 minutes. It's file M-1988-052 Colorado Farms, talking about the board's previous determination of their financial warranty. So Ms. Eisberger and anyone else who intends to participate in this conversation, can you please identify yourself and swear to tell the truth?
This is Amy Eschberger with the division. I swear to tell the truth.
Michael Cunningham with the division. I swear to tell the truth.
Russ
you
Means
both.
with the division. So
Okay, and anyone else, operator, anyone here?
I'm here, Ranko Mosevic.
Okay, thank you. You also swear? Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, with that, Ms. Eisberger, I'll let you take it away.
Okay. Good morning. It's Amy Eschberger with the division. And starting off with an enforcement hearing for the Big R Pit. And this is for permit number M-1988-052. It's operated by Colorado Farms LLC. This is a 110C operation permitted for 9.9 acres to mine sand and gravel. And the site is located in Elbert County. And the approved post-mine land use is pasture land and general agriculture. I did provide a chronology in the presentation form. Hopefully the board has a copy of that. I wasn't going to go through and read each item unless the board wants me to do that. But please let me know if you have a question about any of the items. I was just going to point out a few things. So the important thing to note, I think, is this enforcement hearing stems from a routine surety increase that was issued for the site back on April 20th, 2021. And this was an increase of $32,990. And the operator was given a chance to review the division's cost estimate and provide comment. And we did receive written acceptance of the bond estimate. And the operator indicated they had intended to provide the increased amount by the initial 60-day deadline that was given. And that deadline came and went. It was June 19, 2021. We didn't receive the financial warranty. We did allow the operator some additional time, a little over 30 days to get that submitted. And we did not receive the financial warranty documents. So the board may remember that we did have a hearing in September of 2021, and the board did find a violation for failing to post the additional financial warranty within 60 days of the notice of adjustment. And that was for the board order issued on October 22nd, 2021 for violation number MV 2021-021. And the board gave the operator an additional 60 days to submit the financial warranty increase. And that was November 21st, 2021. And the operator did not submit the financial warranty increase. We did receive a expired check from the operator on January 25th, 2022, so earlier this year, and it was for the increase amount, but this check was expired and we were not able to accept the check. We returned it to the operator. We notified the operator that we needed another form of payment, and we did not receive that. And on February 16th, 2022, we had another board hearing. This one is for failure to comply with the conditions of the board order that was previously issued. And the board did revoke the permit, and they found the financial warranty subject to forfeiture. And that was the board order that was issued on March 22nd, 2022 for violation number MV 2022-003. And the division did go out and perform another inspection of the site on March 24th, 2022, just to assess site conditions. And a copy of that inspection report was provided in the board packet. We found that site conditions remained the same as they were when we inspected the site about a year previously. So that financial warranty increase amount remains the same. And let's see. So in the board order dated March 22nd, 2022, the board found the financial warranty for permit number M 1988-052 to be subject to forfeiture under the act for the operator's failure to cure a default under its performance warranty, despite written notice of the default and ample time to cure such default. When the board has reason to believe a financial warranty is subject to forfeiture, it shall notify the operator and all financial warrantors and grant them the right to appear before the board at the forfeiture hearing. And they're required to have at least 30 days notice. And in this case, the operator is also the financial warrantor. The financial warranty is posted in checks for deposit. So they did receive notice of this hearing on April 1st, 2022, which is more than the required 30-day notice. So pursuant to CRS 34-32.5-118, parent 3, parent 8, at a forfeiture hearing, the board may withdraw or modify any determination that the financial warranty is subject to forfeiture, settle or compromise the determination, or confirm its determination that the financial warranty should be forfeited. And in this case, staff recommends the board confirm its previous determination that the financial warranty for permit number M 1988-052 in the amount of $18,642 should be forfeited pursuant to the act. And if we wanted to add anything else at this time, or so that completes my my initial presentation. And I don't know if the operator who's here with us today, Ronco, if he wanted to speak.
Yes, good morning to everybody. I just want to first, I heard conversation between you two guys over there, and I can see that you guys all experts in that area. I want to tell you, my knowledge about mining sand pits and everything is equal zero. I don't have any experience. I don't know anything about it. I'm a cattle farmer, and I don't know anything. When I purchased the property in action, I really didn't know what I'm buying, really, because I never pulled this one scoop of the sand from the pit. Never use it, never need it. I never will need. And I never operate that mat. I never sell anything. That's mean. My intention was never to even use it. And I didn't even really understand what's that mean financial obligations for that. And I informed myself with next door pit that we leased to other company, Miller Pit, that's next to us. And I kind of understand now what's going on. And I want to ask you, what I have to do to cover that, to nobody ever touch the sand over there, because we really don't need, like I say, I can go take my machines over there and cover what needs to be covered if it's not covered by themselves with the grass and everything. I really have no use. I never had the use, never make $1 on it, neither do I want to make money on that. That's it.
That's a question for the division.
Yes, can I just take my machines and cover what needs to be? I can meet anybody and they can point me with the fingers what I have to do. Cover this, I will cover. I never disturbed that. I owned that land maybe 3-4 years. I never dispersed one scoop of the sand, ever. And I don't want to have sand pit. I really don't need that.
Madam Chair, if I might jump in, just to remind the board that right now we do have a revoked permit on site. So there's not a permit to operate under or to perform reclamation under. That would have the matter of the delinquent financial warranty would need to be addressed first. I appreciate the operator showing up here today. I think as Amy indicated through that chronology, we've had difficulty in communicating and getting a response out of the operator over this time frame. The operator has had multiple opportunities to cure this default, including any time between that last hearing and now. We could have had a conversation about accepting this. By the operator's own testimony, he's not familiar with mining, and I don't know his ability to actually execute the approved reclamation plan out there. But before we could ever have that conversation, this default would need to be cured. You know, I think staff's recommendation based on the history of this remains the same, which is confirming the prior determination that the financial warranty should be forfeited.
Can I please say one more thing? I appreciate it for your comments, sir.
Yes.
For past 6-7 months, actually for past 12 to 18 months, we have in our company dispute about responsibilities because I transfer portion of the property. I kept a loan on a property. I transfer interest in a farm on a different group. And for the last 18 months, we have a really legal problem on who is responsible for what between us. And finally, a few months ago, those people that Lakeport filed Chapter 11. That means property is right now currently in the Chapter 11. Actually, it's not property. It's a company that I assign interest. And that's my answer to the gentleman said that we had opportunity. Yes, we've been fighting here inside and on our side who needs to respond and who will be responsible. Second comment the gentleman made that he doesn't know, can we do that or not? Yes, we do not have experience with exploitation of the sand, but we have experience to the backfill and dirt work because that's our main job. We are contractors, we build roads and we build trenches and everything. That's mean we are very well qualified to do any reclamation. But my comment previously was that I never used sand pit and I don't know anything about mining. That was my comment. I'm done.
Thank you. Go
Madam
ahead.
Chair, if I might just add on, I don't know that I totally followed the legal difficulties that the operator is facing there. I'm not sure if those legal challenges or bankruptcy would pose an impediment to actually completing reclamation. But I guess another thing to note for the board that I forgot to mention, approximately January of this year, we were notified that the landowner had changed. It had been taken over by a company called Lakeport CF LLC. They informed us that they had taken title to the property in 2020. It was only brought to our attention at the beginning of this year. So there would also be legal right of entry issues that would need to be sorted out as well before anything could be done out there.
Thank you. Any questions from the board, either the operator or the division?
Yeah, good morning. This is Lauren. I'm a little confused if you're saying that, I'm sorry, can you hear me okay? Let me start there. Okay, great. I'm a little confused if we're saying that the property was never mined and never excavated, but there's, clearly work needing to be done per the site inspection back in February of 21. Can we talk about what's on site, what needs to be done? It seems like there was mining there if there's reclamation needed.
Go ahead.
Oh, this is Amy Ashburn with Division. So yes, the mine, it's an older permit. It was issued in 1988. And it has been mined. It's a rather small permit. It's 9.9 acres. It's mostly mined out at this time. There's a little bit of material left. Colorado Farms LLC, the current operator, took over the permit in 2019, I believe, after the previous permittee passed away, and they took it over from the estate. And so they did do a permit transfer to take it over. They were also the landowners at the time, and their intent, our understanding, was to mine the site, to complete mining the site and reclaim the site. And I just want to point out that we've been on site, I think at least three, maybe 4 times over the past 4 years. And 3 of those times was with the current operator. And I did meet with the operator on site. He expressed a couple of years ago, he wanted to know what to do to reclaim it. I went through that with him on site. It's fairly minimal, I would say, compared to other similar sites. It's just grading off a high wall and replacing some topsoil and revegetating it. And we discussed that on site. I've also outlined it in my inspection report, in the last few inspection reports. So, and I've also spoken with the operator on the phone, and we've talked about what needs to be done. We actually cited a problem in our report. I don't have this one included in this packet. It was in the last packet. I believe it was in 2020, if I'm not mistaken, but we did cite a problem for failure to reclaim within 5 years, because it had been over 5 years since mining had been conducted at the site. We kind of, and at the time, the operator came back and said, you know, hey, we have intent to mine it. We have this written in the permit record that they said, we're going to continue mining it this year, and then we'll reclaim it, you know. And so we abated that problem. And since that time, I have not seen any evidence that mining or reclamation has occurred. And I just feel like, as much as I've talked with the operator about what needs to be done, there should be no confusion about the reclamation that remains at the site. It's been documented in the inspection reports that were sent to the operator. I've discussed it on the phone with them on site. So I just wanted to clarify that as well.
Great, thank you. Appreciate it.
Again, can I please? Are you gonna allow me to?
May I ask a question or two first?
Yeah. Go ahead, sir.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Go
ahead.
Is it the intention, if we go ahead with the forfeiture of the bond, it's the intention of the agency then to go ahead and reclaim the property? Is that correct? And then I hear from the operator that they don't want to use it and they want to reclaim it. So maybe we feel like we're in more comfortable hands if that's what the DRMS is going to do, is reclaim it. And that's maybe the goal of the forfeiture of this bond. Am I misconstruing anything here?
This is Michael Cunningham, Mr. Secretary. No, that's correct. That would be the intent of the division. If the financial warranty was forfeited, the project would be handed off to the inactive mines program, and then they would complete reclamation at the site.
Okay, thank you.
I have nothing to say. That's a gentleman that kind of helped me with my question.
That would have been your response as well.
I mean, I still don't understand. Can you explain to me? You would guys hire somebody to do that and use the money that you have to do that? I would be perfectly happy with that. I would be more than happy with that.
Let's do it then.
I would even help with the access. I would even help for no charges, nothing. I would not ask for anything. I would help people that you send there to show them whatever they need, assistance, if they need water, whatever. I will help anything I need.
Sounds like a good solution.
Yeah, that would perfectly work for me.
So you understand that if we confirm the previous determination, which means that the previous financial warranty that's about $18,000 is forfeited, then the division comes in and does their reclamation work, which is a pretty fundamental piece of the act and why we're here. So you understand that that's kind of the end game here with this?
I can only say thank you guys for that. That's perfect for me, you know?
Okay, good. Well, I'm glad we got some clarification around that. Anything from the division? Are we missing anything in this conversation?
No, I don't believe we have anything further to add. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you both for, yeah, thank you.
Please guys
any
tell
discussion?
me when you need me. I apologize for interruption. I didn't mean it, but internet. Please just guys notify me whatever you need, because we have a gate over there. I will open gate anytime, 24/7. Whatever you guys need, please contact me and no problem. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other further discussion from the board?
Yeah, this is Lauren. I I guess I want to reiterate what you just said, Ms. Wareham. We're all understanding that the $18,000 will be forfeit, and that by agreeing with the division's recommendation, the division's inactive mines program will come in and do that reclamation. Okay, great. I just wanted to make sure we were on the same page there.
Thank you, guys.
Any other
Can I
discussion from the board?
excuse myself?
You might want to, you can. We just have to formally vote on
Okay,
this
go ahead.
matter.
I'll be
So we're
here.
going to have a quick discussion and then the board will vote. Any other discussion from the board? Anyone who would like to make a motion?
See, I would move, Chuck, you might want to help me, that we affirm the previous decision by the board. I don't remember the date of that.
March
What's that?
March 22nd, 2022.
March 22nd, that we accept the bond amount of $18,642 for the purpose of reclaiming subject site.
Second.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, same sign. Okay, hearing none, the motion passes. Thank you all for your time and presence at this conversation. And yes, you as the operator, you may leave if you would like to. Thank you very much for being here. Okay, I'm doing a little time check here. We're only about a half an hour in. This conversation could be about 60 minutes. Sometimes we have a natural break there once we get into conversations. I guess I would ask the division sort of, we'll move on with item number 6. This is a formal public hearing of Young Ranch Resource LLC. If folks need a break in, I don't know, 40 minutes or so, we can find a natural break in that. Does that sound good to do the division for process? Yeah. Okay. So this is item number 6, file M-2021-009, Young Ranch Resource LLC. Consideration of recommendation to approve a 112C permit application with objections. Those who plan to participate, please identify yourself and sort of tell the truth. You can just hold your hand up and maybe unmic yourself so we can see you. The division.
Sort of tell the truth.
Bergmeyer.
Okay. Thank you so much. Ms. Eichberger, again, we'll hand it over to you.
Madam Chair, I know we have Susan Bergmeyer here this morning, who acted as the pre-hearing conference officer. I believe she has that draft order to present to the board first.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm Susan Bergmeyer, and I did prepare the pre-hearing order. I was the conference officer at the pre-hearing conference that was held on June 6th. And at that conference, we had 8 objectors present, and we have since received withdrawals from 4 of those objectors. I believe we have 2 objectors present at the meeting at this time, at the hearing today. So the background on this application: the application was received by the division on May 17th, 2021. And during the period of notice, the application filing, the division received 40 timely objections. And at the time of the hearing, all but 14 of those objections had been withdrawn. And then, as I mentioned, of the 14 remaining objectors, 8 were present at the pre-hearing conference. During, and I can let you know who was present during that. We had Jonathan Agar, Anthony Kaspari, Dean Powell, Robin Ralph Sager, Anthony Zotti, Jared Shipman, Margie Kaspari, representing Friends of Clear Creek, and Claire Stone. And I believe present today we have remaining Claire Stone and Jonalyn Agar. During the meeting, we discussed the issues that were identified to be jurisdictional, and then we also discussed non-jurisdictional items. And just reading through the items that we determined to be non-jurisdictional that would not be presented during the hearing today are deed restrictions, increased truck traffic and traffic safety, impacts to roads, impacts to air quality, noise and or light pollution, impacts to tourism and or recreation, location of the proposed operation, increased impacts to an area already impacted by mining, visual impacts, impacts to quality of life, rural character of Gilpin County, property values and or businesses, reduced demand for construction materials, tax liability associated with the proposed operation, flagpole annexation to Central City, and another proposed mine operation after having recently defeated a proposed operation near Empire. So all of those items were determined to be non-jurisdictional and were presented as such during the pre-hearing conference. The remaining items that were jurisdictional, the objections, were discussed during the pre-hearing conference. At the time of the conference, we asked if there were any remaining concerns. There was a discussion regarding wildlife, and all of the other concerns were determined to be resolved. So the remaining items that were jurisdictional were reclamation plan, again, had been determined to be resolved, reclamation bond, resolved. Wildlife, as I said, there was discussion, but at the close of the meeting, it was determined that there were no further comments. And then other issues resolved were water quality, water quantity, geological concerns, application review timeframe, other permits and licenses. So during the meeting, when it was determined that there were no remaining objections, we then set 20 minutes for the division to present its presentation and then 20 minutes for the applicant. We did not set time for objectors because at the time of the pre-hearing conference, it was determined that those issues were resolved. So if there are any questions on the order that was prepared, I can take those. I'm sorry, Nell, did you want to recognize or should I?
Yeah, I can, I'm sorry. And I'm guessing that I'm just gonna try to address you by, can you just state your name because it's not on the.
Deanne Powell, I'm with the objectors.
Okay.
I didn't realize that Deanne was present. I'm sorry. And Deanne has not filed a withdrawal. So Deanne Powell is still listed as an objector. I'm sorry. I thought that you were Jonalyn Agar. My apologies.
So we have three objectors on the call.
It looks like we have just two. We have Claire Stone and
Cool.
we have Deanne
Okay.
Powell.
Okay.
I'm sorry, guys. I think we have Lynn Agar too.
Yep, I see Miss Agar,
Okay.
and I see
So we have three. And there was
Claire
one
Stone. Okay, I
remaining,
see.
and that would be Jared Shipman from the city of Idaho Springs, and I don't believe Jared Shipman is present.
Okay. But just to confirm, you had in the pre-hearing order still agreed that the objectors' objections had been resolved. So we are still proposing that we go ahead with 20 minutes for the division and 20 minutes for the applicant.
That was what was proposed, yes. During the pre-hearing conference, we asked several times toward the close of the conference if there were remaining objections and did not hear any.
Okay. Is that, oh, go ahead.
This is
Mr.
Scott
Schultz.
Phillips, counsel for the division in this matter, which is staff to the board in this. Just want to clarify a little bit of the procedural matters. This is a draft pre-hearing order that hearing officer Bergmeyer is presenting to the board, and it's still the board's ultimate decision on how they want to move forward on this. There was, I think, some confusion by the objectors in terms of, what, I think they're in agreement that there are some things that the division and the operator don't feel are jurisdictional, but they still are asking, they may want to address the board on this. But I just wanted to clarify that this is a draft pre-hearing order that Hearing Officer Bergmeyer is presenting to the board, and this is the objector's opportunity to essentially object to that pre-hearing order and ask for ask the board for further requests. So I hope I'm not being more confusing, but I'm trying to clarify where we are procedurally in this matter.
Thank you. So it sounds almost like we need to do two actions in this. At first, we need to discuss whether or not we want to proceed as such with the draft pre-hearing order, then depending on how that goes here, moving forward onto the 112C application itself. Is that correct?
Yeah, no, I think that's right, Madam Chair. I would just ask the objectors if they have requested amendments or objections to the draft pre-hearing order that the board consider at this time, that they go ahead and ask to be recognized to raise those with the board.
May I speak?
Sure.
I'm not sure whether that was an invitation to speak. It's very unclear. Yes, I do still have objections because I feel that some of the non-jurisdictional issues were ignored and should still be part of the remit. So I would like to make a statement.
Okay, so maybe what we need to do is we just need to decide as a board, please, that maybe we want to hear this, accept this draft pre-hearing order, noting that there are still 3 objectors who feel like some of their perspectives were not fully either understood or taken into account, and give a lot, a small amount of time given perspective wise. If the division has 20 minutes and the applicant has 20 minutes, 2 minutes apiece for the objectors, so a total of 6 minutes, just to clarify anything that you feel like might be missed. We're not going to hear those things right now. We'll hear that during the actual applicant. Does that sound fair? 3 of you, 2 minutes apiece, 6 minutes. Okay. So the division's going to have about 20 minutes to discuss. The applicant 20 minutes, 6 minutes for the objectors, 2 minutes apiece, or however you'd like to do that. Mr. Koyman usually helps keep track of time there. We won't go through this terribly formally since that's not a huge amount of time. So with that, could we maybe have a motion to move forward with the amended draft pre-hearing order?
Yeah, sorry, Ms. Willerham, this is Lauren again. I would move that we actually increase the objector's time to 15 minutes, 5 minutes each. Just, I'm not sure if they all had a chance to prepare to speak today. And 2 minutes is tricky if you're not ready for it. So I would move to approve the amended draft pre-hearing order as a final pre-hearing order, with the change that we increase the objector's time to a total of 15 minutes.
Anthony, I'll second.
Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Okay, so we will move forward with the draft pre-hearing order, the division, and the applicant, and then some time for the objectors. Okay, thank you, Ms. Bergmeyer. So moving along now to the division for your portion of the 20 minutes.
Right, we're gonna share our screen here, so just 1 second.
This is Amy Esberg with the division. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So this is a formal board hearing for the Young Ranch Resource Quarry, file number M 2021-009. This application was submitted by Young Ranch Resource LLC, and this hearing is for consideration of the 112C permit application, which received objections. And I'll go ahead and just start the staff presentation. So the proposed site straddles the Gilpin and Clear Creek County line. And it's located about 2 miles from Central City, Black Hawk, and Idaho Springs. And access to the site is directly off of Central City Parkway. Slide 4 provides a brief overview of the application. And as shown on the previous slide, the proposed site is located in both Gilpin and Clear Creek counties. The proposed permit area is 469.7 acres with an affected area of 335.1 acres. The primary commodity to be mined is metamorphic bedrock and the overlying gravel deposit for construction aggregate use. The surface owner of the affected lands is Young Ranch Resource LLC, the permittee, and Central City for the parkway right-of-way and the associated cut-fill areas adjacent to the parkway. And the mineral owner of the affected lands is also Young Ranch Resource LLC and Central City. This permit is for a surface mine, an open pit surface mine. The mining plan proposes a total of 5 mine phases with concurrent reclamation. The operation would drill and blast a high wall bench sequence, haul the material to an on-site processing facility, and then load the material for transport off-site. The proposed post-mining land use is a combination of rangeland and wildlife habitat. And the required financial warranty for the proposed operation is set at $330,461, and that would be for the phase 1 disturbance. Slide 5 includes a summary of the application review process. So as Susan noted earlier, the application was filed for review on May 17th, 2021. A technical review team comprised of 3 division staff members was assigned to reviewing this application. I was the lead specialist and reviewed all application materials. Rob Zuber reviewed the sections pertaining to surface water and stormwater management, and Zach Trujillo reviewed sections pertaining to geotechnical stability. The application review period included the division issuing a total of 5 adequacy review letters. We conducted a total of 3 site inspections, one of which included CPW at their request. And the applicant satisfactorily addressed all the adequacy items that were identified in the application within the review period. Therefore, on May 17th, 2022, DRMS issued a recommendation and rationale for approval of the application, and the required bond amount for permit issuance was set at $330,461, and that would be for a disturbance of 43.6 acres for phase 1. On slide 6, the proposed permit area of 469.7 acres is outlined in purple. And this just shows the majority of the permit area would be west of the parkway, and a smaller portion is located east of the parkway. And I just want to note, I know I talk kind of fast, so feel free to ask any questions if you have any, board. And I'm moving through these slides pretty quickly. So on slide 7, the proposed affected area of 335.1 acres is shown with the orange polygon in relation to the proposed permit area, which is shown in the purple. And then the next few slides depicts the 5 mine phases that were proposed in the application. So starting with phase 1, and this is, like I mentioned earlier, it's for the required financial warranty amount. So it'll be based on this phase 1 disturbance shown on this map. And the disturbance during this phase would include the initial quarry development west of the parkway. And then beginning construction of the waste rock landform east of the parkway. And during mine phase 2, the quarry operations would expand to the south, and a separate waste rock landform would be constructed east of the parkway. And I just wanted to note that prior to moving into this phase 2, the operator would need to submit a technical revision to increase the maximum disturbance beyond the 43.6 acres and to also update the financial warranty accordingly. So during mine phase 3, the quarry operations will continue in the eastern half of the quarry area. And the 2 separate waste rock landforms will join during this phase, creating one waste rock landform. And during mine phase 4, an internal road will be constructed at the center of the quarry area, and the quarry operations will expand into the western half of the quarry area. And additional lifts will be placed on the waste rock landform. And then finally in phase 5, and I just want to point out the proposed life of mine is approximately 100 years. So this would be at the end of mining, the last phase. The quarry operations would be completed in the western half. So we have a final pit floor elevation of approximately 7,850 feet. And then a final waste rock landform elevation of 8,100 feet. Then slide 13 includes a schematic cross-section of the proposed quarry high wall configuration. It shows the 25-foot high wall benches will be backfilled to a final slope of 2:1 and revegetated as the mining progresses downward. The operator committed to having no more than 1 active high wall bench at any time. And slide 14 includes a schematic cross-section of the proposed waste rock landform configuration, showing the 50-foot high lifts will be graded to a final slope gradient of 2.2:1 and revegetated as additional lifts are placed on top. The operator committed in the application to having no more than 2 active waste rock lifts at any time. And then slide 15 shows the reclamation plan map submitted in the application. And I've added some text to this just to point out the 2 revegetation plans. So you'll have the proposal is to have 2 dry excavation areas that will be separated by an internal road west of the CCP. And then you would have the waste rock landform east of the CCP. And the slopes would be graded, as I've shown on the previous slides, and the entire disturbance area would be revegetated with 2 revegetation plans depending on the slope orientation. So mainly the south and west facing slopes and the flat areas like the pit floors and the top of the waste rock landform would be revegetated with a dry rangeland grass mixture. And mainly the north and east facing slopes would be revegetated with a forest shrub tree mixture to imitate the existing conditions at the site. And so slide 16 provides a brief summary of the objections and comments received on the application. And I know Susan has already gone over some of this, so perhaps I won't read through all the issues here, but just to reiterate, we did receive 40 timely objection letters within the comment period, and we received 2 agency comment letters. One was from History Colorado, and one was from the city of Idaho Springs. And all jurisdictional concerns that were raised by the objecting parties and the commenting agencies were addressed through the adequacy review process. as described in the division's rationale for approval dated May 17, 2022. And there were, the division grouped the jurisdictional issues into 8 categories, as Susan described earlier. And we had 8 parties attend the pre-hearing conference on June 6th, during which all jurisdictional issues were resolved. And as she noted, we did have 4 withdrawals, so we had 4 remaining parties. So slide 17 includes the staff's recommendation. On May 17, 2022, division staff determined that the 112C permit application submitted for the Young Ranch Resource Quarry, file number M 2021-009, to have satisfied the requirements of the Act and issued its recommendation to approve the application over objections. The division is requesting the board approve the 112C application submitted for the Young Ranch Resource Quarry. And that concludes the staff presentation. Does the board have any questions?
There'll be activity on both sides of the parkway through all 5 phases, and especially through phase 1.
This is Amy with the division. Yes, and I'm sorry, I forgot to point out, there will be an underpass constructed under the parkway. So to accommodate the mine traffic back and forth between the quarry on the west side and the waste rock landform on the east side. So yes, there will be activity on both sides. The majority of the activity will be on the west side of the parkway, but they will have an underpass constructed for accessing those areas. And they're working with Central City, who owns the parkway, to construct that underpass.
Another question for you. I see letters from City of Idaho Springs and History Colorado. Obviously, CPW is very involved in this process, especially attending the site inspections. I don't see a letter from them. I don't see any written comment. And I don't see a letter from like a DWR or anyone talking about water resources.
This is Michael Cunningham with the division, and that's correct. We did not have a comment letter from either DWR or CPW. However, as Amy noted, CPW was engaged throughout this process. As the board, I think, is aware, prior to approving a reclamation plan, the division will go out and perform a pre-operation inspection, which we did. And we also coordinated with CPW to have them go out in the field on their own. So it was a whole separate inspection. That's not something we normally do, but we were happy to accommodate them. We thought it was important. We met with maybe about 4 to 6 different officers out there, each with their own respective roles. We had a really good site visit, great conversation with them. It was an opportunity to really dive down into the details of this reclamation plan, walk them around the site, talk to them, hear their concerns. And so, at the end of the day, we did not have a final comment letter from them, but I do want the board just to be aware that they were engaged. We had open lines of dialogue with them. And, it would have been nice if we, maybe had a letter that said something to the effect of no concerns or something like that. But I do appreciate that CPW is quite busy. They're tasked with a lot. And, we appreciate when they can make the time to be engaged in our process. So we're confident that the plan as put forth and recommended for approval, would mitigate any impacts against wildlife, and through our conversations with CPW, we believe they agree.
Okay. And then something I did see noted in many of the comment letters of the objections, and from my personal experience, how are abandoned mines addressed as part of this application? Are there any DRMS closures on site within the permit boundaries? Any unaddressed abandoned mines within the permit boundaries?
Yeah, good question. We're not
aware of any abandoned mines, and the applicant did do a cultural resource inventory, and there were no abandoned mines that were identified in that I'm aware of.
Okay, great.
And this is largely because where this site is situated, it's close to, but it is outside of the mineral belt. So we're certainly in close proximity to a lot of the historic mining areas, and there are quite a few abandoned mines up in the Central City Blackhawk area, but nothing on this property. Again, that we're at.
Okay, yeah, I just want to make sure we were checking within the permit boundaries. Great, thank you.
Mr. Singletary?
Tell me, will the applicant have to get a permit from both Clear Creek and Gilpin counties, or how's that working, or have they already done so?
They haven't done so yet. They did list it as, they do have to obtain local permits from Gilpin and Clear Creek for the various activities, but I should note that the portion of the permit area that is located in Clear Creek, I believe all, or at least a good portion of that is going to be designated as a deed restricted wildlife mitigation corridor, which will not be mined. So the whole southern portion of the permit area, and it may be that that portion is in Clear Creek. I'm not for sure if the entire part of it is, but they will have to go through the local zoning process. After, if they get this permit, they're going to have to get the local permits. They're going to have to get us a whole series of permits that they told us in Exhibit M, air quality. They're going to need discharge permits for 3 outfalls. They're going to need, multiple permits, and they definitely will have to go through the county process as well.
Yes, just to clarify, they're going to have to go through both counties?
I believe so, because the permit area is in both, the proposed permit area is in both counties, but I'm just not aware of the Clear Creek process, like if there's anything specific to, if you're going to designate it as a wildlife corridor and not actually mine that area, that process may be a little different than the Gilpin County process, but they will have to go through the county process for both counties.
Thank you.
Any other board discussion after the presentation from the division?
Yeah, Madam Chair, may I address it? Yeah.
Sure.
So this is really the first step. The county still has to approve on their end to make sure this can happen in the community. So there's still a community engagement period for local residents to voice concerns that are kind of addressed in their objections on this permit application. So is that correct on the division side?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
And I think as a point of clarification, although in our oversight in the draft pre-hearing order, just because it's non-jurisdictional to what the oversight of the act says does not mean that it might not be a jurisdictional issue, for something else. If there was air permit or water quality or something else, but we are here to discuss what is jurisdictional within the act. So.
Madam Chair, can I request that speakers identify themselves and who they represent? I'd just like to know who's talking. I didn't know who this last fellow was, for example, who he represented.
Madam Chair, if I may, this is Scott Schultz, counsel for the division. If we could just save the remaining time of the division's time for the rebuttal, and maybe the division may need a little bit of extra time in order to adequately respond to the objectors' concerns. We just want to not be shortchanged, and that wasn't part of the draft pre-hearing order. So sorry for being a little tardy on that, but the division would like to have time to adequately respond to the objectors' concerns.
Fair enough. That sounds good. Okay, nothing else from the division at the moment then? Okay. Mr. Young, I'm assuming anyone else besides you on behalf of the applicant?
I'll
Yes.
go first, if I may, Bob. Good morning, Madam Chair. My name and members of the board. My name is Mark Lasis. With me is my colleague Mamie Lang, and we're with the law firm of Ireland, Stapleton, Pryor and Pascoe, and we represent the applicant, Young Ranch Resource LLC. We want to acknowledge and thank the division for their helpful and informative presentation today and for the thorough and complete review of our application, and which ultimately led to their recommendation, which is before the board today. With us today is Mr. Young of Young Ranch Resource. We also have several witnesses, all of whom assisted with the preparation of our application. Should the board have any specific questions about the application, we can direct it to the appropriate witness. Briefly, the Colorado Land Reclamation Act for the extraction of construction materials establishes that mining and reclamation are compatible as a matter of law, and the express legislative purpose is to foster and encourage responsible mining, and that's exactly what we're here to do today. The 112C Young Ranch Resource application pending before the board meets all the criteria set forth in the statute under section 115(4) and the applicable rules, and is appropriately supported by the division for approval. And as the board will see, this is exactly the type of mining application that should be approved by the board, as it gives careful thought and consideration to the plan for reclamation and then the impacts on wildlife, water, and the environment. And it's structured to give the least impact possible because the affected area will be reclaimed concurrently as mining progresses. So as just a matter of housekeeping, we would like to reserve 10 minutes for rebuttal to address any of the issues raised by the objectors. And we also just ask for admission of all the exhibits into the record that we listed on our exhibit list. And with that, I'd like to turn things over to Mr. Young, who'll give an overview of the applicant and the application.
Hi, my name is Bob Young, and I represent the family that owns Young Ranch. Young Ranch is a 4,000 acre ranch that's located in both Clear Creek and Gilpin County. My parents moved to Colorado in 1955 after my dad got out of the service. It was his dream and has been his life's work to put this ranch together. He's 91 now, and I can say that our approach to this project has been meticulous. When we first started to discuss something like this, my dad's, his heart is in that property. I think when you spend your lifetime putting something like that together, it's his legacy, it's his life's work, and it's a very special place to both him and my family. So when we started thinking about this, our first kind of call to duty was outlining the way that we wanted to go about it. And what we came up with my dad's leadership was, first of all, do justice to the land. And to do justice to the land, it's not just reclamation, but it's also part of the planning process. So if you look at our plan, we asked our very talented mining engineers to look at the surrounding area and what would it take to blend the contours of the surrounding area into this mine so that future generations, once reclamation has been completed, view this as something that is truly brought back to its former glory. So, the reclamation plan really started with the mining plan. It started with identifying the types of slopes that were appropriate for the area, both to look natural, but also to bring the area back to suitable environment for wildlife. Our mining engineers determined what those slopes were. They designed it such that the contours blend in with the surrounding areas. And then the next step was to identify the types of vegetation that currently exist so that we can replicate that concurrently with our reclamation program. And I think that's really important in terms of our approach, is that the reclamation happens as you do the mining. So Amy mentioned that we have committed to just having one open bench on the mine side at any one time and two open benches on the waste depositories at any one time. This allows us to replant the area with its native vegetation, which means very similar to what the Forest Service would do after a burn or after a foresting logging operation. So you go in there, and before the area is disturbed, you identify the type of vegetations, the slope aspects that take certain types of vegetation, and then you replicate that during your reclamation process. That was very important to us because this is part of our ranch. When it's reclaimed, as it's reclaimed, it's important to our family, and I think to the community in general, that it's done in a way that truly does justice to the land. By doing justice to the land, you're also doing justice to the wildlife. Early on, we identified that the southern portion of this site was important for wildlife movement. We set aside that portion so that during the entire length of the mine process, that land is set aside. I think it starts out around 80 acres and it increases to 100 and some acres. And that land is set aside so that the wildlife has adequate space to have their movement. When early in the process, we were informed that we should do a wildlife study. I sat down with my dad about that. The wildlife study primarily is for the 469 acres. My dad's immediate thought was, why are we looking at 469 acres when we own 6.5 miles of the parkway right of way? We adjoin the parkway for 6.5 miles. So we determined that, the elk don't know exactly where this mine is and they don't really care. Our ranch, 4,000 acres, is just a little postage stamp in terms of their habitat and their range. We committed to studying the entire 6.5 miles of parkway. When the parkway was put through, there weren't accommodations for wildlife. So we see this project as an opportunity for my family to impact that area's wildlife in a positive way for the entirety of the 6.5 miles. So our wildlife experts studied that area and have come up with a series of recommendations that we have committed to within our permit to implement over time. And we feel that those mitigation efforts will improve the wildlife interaction with the parkway tremendously over time. So I want to also reserve some of our time for any questions that the board may have. But I can also say that in terms of the local process, I have met with all of the local towns. I've talked to the county planners in both counties. I've met with the cities. I've met with a lot of individuals, both objectors and people that are for the project. This process has been very informative. When we initially got the 40 objectors, my initial thought was I need to reach out to every one of them and understand what their objection is. In that process, I spent hours in people's living rooms and on site and on the phone. And I learned a lot in terms of what the different individuals' concerns were. And fortunately, we were able to address a number of those items, such as committing to adhere to the dark sky initiative, committing to taking things into consideration like noise from Jake breaks. There were a lot of good things that came through that process, and it was a long process. And through that process, we were able to initially get, I think it was 16 objectors to withdraw, just based on their level of comfort after meeting with me. And then after the pre-hearing conference, we had an additional 4 that decided to withdraw. And a lot of the objectors, after I had talked to them, weren't necessarily interested in withdrawing, but they said, you know what, we no longer have concerns. So it was a good process. I think the process worked. It was well supported by the DRMS staff in terms of them kind of outlining where we needed to direct this project in terms of their very detailed adequacy reviews. The interaction that I've had over time with the Division of Wildlife has been very productive. My family has been in contact with them for many years, just because we do take the care of the wildlife on our property very seriously. And, you know, that's caring for the land, caring for the wildlife, and doing something that is respectful and whatnot to the community is very important to my family. We are here for the long run. The ranch has been in our family since my dad started it in 1968, so 54 years. He's 91 now, still very active up there. And that's what keeps him active, because his heart is in this. And, you know, we see this as being something that is very important to the family, and I think a good asset for the community. So it's been a really enjoyable process, and I will reserve the rest of my time for any questions that the board may have.
Thank you. And I don't know if everyone could see the chat, but you know, the board questions, if you're answering board questions, don't count against your time. You do still have about 10 minutes left for what we could term as rebuttal, should that be, you know, the appropriate thing, just the same as the division. So with that, thank you both. Any questions from the board for the applicant?
Of course I have questions. Of course I do. I'm looking at exhibit G1 that is regarding some of the, I believe, proposed wells or existing wells on property. If we could talk through some of the technicalities there associated with some of the monitoring that's already happened, ongoing water quality and water level monitoring. And then how that might play into your planning efforts there.
Lauren, in just a moment. Ms. Powell, I just want to let you know that right now the board is asking questions.
She needs
of the
to
applicant.
identify herself. I don't know who she is.
I did call on her and I said, Ms. Duncan. So this is Lauren, board member Lauren Duncan speaking right now. Thank you.
Yep. Apologies. I will also introduce myself every time I ask questions. Thank you.
So as part of the process, we looked at any wells that were within a certain radius of the project. Those wells have an identifiable water level, water table in each one of those. Ben Langenfeld, who is one of our consultants, looked at that information and calculated a reasonable expectation in terms of where the water table was as it relates to our project. As it relates to our project, it's about 500 feet below where our bottom of mine will be. So, and Ben, correct me if I get any of this incorrect, but based on that, we are in an area that we do not expect to encounter any groundwater or any dewatering as you may have in a typical kind of north out in the plains type gravel operation. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and I think I read also in your application that you would do some ongoing monitoring. And maybe that's also what's indicated on this figure.
Yes. So as I understand the process, we want to have a baseline of where those wells are currently. And, you know, for the most part, fortunately for us, we don't have wells that are in close proximity to us, but closer down towards like Hidden Valley, where it's closer to the Clear Creek Basin. There are also a couple of, I believe, wells, either monitoring wells or wells in the North Clear Creek Basin as well. So we will want to get data on those and make sure that you know, we have good information on them.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Other questions from board members? Okay. All right, so with that, we will move along. So as determined originally, We have about 15 minutes for the objectors to go through. I think what I'm going to do is I've got the sheet here on page 94 of the draft pre-hearing order with Ms. Agar, Ms. Powell, and Ms. Stone. I would just probably go in that order just so that I can keep that in track. It's 15 minutes total. If you you don't have to stay exactly to 5 minutes apiece. If you'd like to share that time with someone else, feel free to do so. But Ms. Agar, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. If you would like to go first, the floor is yours.
Well, the pollen has not treated me well at all. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
Poor
great.
thing.
Yes. Excuse me. My concern, and it is true, I have talked to Mr. Young various times, and he has really given me some good ideas for how to pursue what you all are saying are non-jurisdictional. But my primary concern is for the Clear Creek 6 canyon, the noise level, the Jake breaks, the accidents that have happened, and then recreational interest. Excuse me, I'm just not being able to speak well. When you go to the path along Clear Creek that is being constructed, the Peaks to Plains Trail, and try to enjoy that. The noise from the trucks is insane. The excuse me, and it affects hikers, kayakers, rafters, climbers, everyone. And it's that I understand that your board is not seeing that as part of the issue. But that is why I've had to continue my objection, is to make sure that maybe someday the effects of other people would be taken into consideration. And I think that I will cede the rest of my time to the other two objectors. But thank you very, very much.
Thank you very much. Ms. Powell?
Much like Ms. Agar just said, a lot of mine are beyond your purview, according to what the ramifications, jurisdictional, as you guys are saying. But I still have concerns about water, especially quantity. We are going into, well, we're not going into, we're in a very deep drought, and it doesn't appear to be letting up. And I just feel like the figures for the water quantity are from times that are not current, therefore aren't going to yield as much water. It's a beautiful piece of land as is, and in my opinion, the best use is leaving it as is. If they were going to do anything to disrupt it, what we need more in the county is housing, and I realize again that's outside of your purview, but if they were going to ruin the ranch, they might as well make it for housing instead of a gravel pit. We don't need another gravel pit. It'd be good to get rid of the one that's there already. I know that Claire's going to talk about how we can't consider the gravel pits separate from each other because they're together going to take up so much of the wildlife space that it's going to be problematic. The animals don't adapt as easily as people do, and they're just terribly being impinged upon, especially with the blasting and the like. It is not adequately covered in the information I've seen from DRMS. I understand that a lot of my objections are outside of your jurisdiction, but there needs to be a place within DRMS's regulations where they take into account not only just the geology and the, minerals in the ground and all of that. It needs to be that what the neighbors and the people of the county want or expect, and a gravel pit is not the best use of this land at this time. And I will cede my additional time to Claire. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Stone?
Hi, my name is Claire Stone. I'm a resident of Gilpin County. I think there is a little bit of confusion about why we are still objecting when apparently our objections were resolved. I made it clear at the time that my objection relates to the cumulative impact of having a quarry permitted right next to an existing quarry. And I have a statement to read, which I've already sent. Everybody knows about it. Robert's seen it, etc. And that's regarding wildlife. The rationale to approve the quarry permit states that the surrounding areas are largely underdeveloped. This fails to acknowledge that the proposed site is actually adjacent to I-70, adjacent to a highway, and adjacent to an extensive existing quarry. That's 286 acres plus 225 of recently permitted spur amendment of the Frey quarry. In total, if you add the Young Ranch, we're talking about almost 1,000 acres of disrupted land. None of the DMS's RS's review so far has mentioned it. It popped up if you saw the map that the quarry is there already, the Frey quarry, and note that the Frey quarry is not reforested. It is a hazard as it is. It throws up lots of dust, etc. Anyway, I don't see how, when you permit one quarry, you cannot consider another one right next door and the cumulative impact and say that this is non-jurisdictional. It's certainly nothing to do with Gilpin County. Where else do we take it if it's not to you? And then regarding the non-jurisdictional issues, I have to say, I feel that it is remiss that you will not consider the impact of the traffic. A quick Google search, you will see that these are exceptionally dangerous roads as described by the media. We're talking about Floyd Hill on I-70. We're talking about Clear Creek Canyon, Highway 6. And I can list, and I'm happy to list, 21st of April, 2021, crash, 6th of May, a semi and a sedan, 7th of June, 21, vehicle crash, 15th of July, a van and pedestrian crash. We're talking about crashes monthly. One happened this morning and caused Highway 6 to close. So far this year at Floyd Hill, we've had US 40 blocked with traffic because of the weather. We've had multiple semi crashes. We had a tractor trailer crash and fire all on Floyd Hill. So this isn't an alternative route. This is the route that we're talking about. Robert has said that Frey, and I have sat outside Frey Quarry, I know that they put 600, 700 trucks on that road every day. We're talking about a truck every 45 seconds leaving that quarry. So we're talking now about an additional 600 trucks per day on these roads. I haven't gone back any further than this. This is the same accident that, even if you're not familiar with the area, you're familiar with the case of the semi-truck driver who was prosecuted when he killed 4 people on that same stretch of road. My objection to the Young Ranch permit is not in my backyard. I can see the quarry that exists as it is. It is that we have a very large quarry in the immediate vicinity. It's the cumulative impact, and nothing has been said about that. That's the end. That's the end of my objection. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't know if we would entertain any questions from the board, or we will just move along to any rebuttal from the division. I believe you have about 10 minutes left. We do that? Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Michael Cunningham with the division. Just to touch on a few of the concerns that we heard from our objectors. I guess first, we're not prepared to discuss anything other than the Young Ranch today, which is what this hearing is about. I know that the nearby quarry was referenced. That's a separate matter, and the board has in fact held a hearing on that with opportunity for public comment on that specific site. But Ms. Stone is correct. We do not look at cumulative impacts. The act and the rules do not direct staff to do that. Do not, if you will, open up the door for that sort of a review, whether it's on wildlife or other aspects of impacts from a mining operation. But I would point out, while we may not specifically have a rule that addresses the cumulative impacts, as I noted, we were very much engaged with CPW. And CPW looks at things very differently than we do. They're not bound by permit boundaries. They have to protect the wildlife wherever it is that they may go. And so we did have discussions with them on site, and we were aware that they were looking at it in a different manner. They took a more global approach to it. As we said, we didn't receive anything formally in writing from them at the end of the day, but we're confident that the plan that was put forth meets their concerns and provides for the best mitigation for wildlife out there. I think I don't want to debate with Ms. Stone, how the surrounding area was characterized. As she noted, I think the rationale had language that the surrounding areas were largely undeveloped. Still believe that's an accurate characterization, but I want to point out for the board that it's really just a descriptive statement. It's not a criteria that was used to evaluate wildlife or wildlife impacts out there at the mine site. And so, with that, we do have prepared specific slides that we could walk the board through on wildlife or any other topic of concern. But I guess I just wanted to hear from the board if there is a specific area that you would like more information on from staff, and we're happy to address that.
Mr. Singletary.
Yeah, Mr. Cunningham, can you kind of go into a little more detail with regard to the water use and where it comes from and how what happens if it runs out? I noticed they estimate between 36 and 46 acre feet per year. Where does that water come from? Have you talked to the Department of Water Resources, and just give me a further background and detail on where we sit with that in that regard?
Absolutely, Mr. Singletary. And I think that was a concern expressed by Ms. Powell as well. The application as it currently stands provides a projected use of water on an annual basis. At this time, and the applicant can certainly correct me if I'm wrong, they have not identified the specific source from which they're going to purchase or lease their water. They have identified several available sources of legal water that they can pursue. And we have a commitment in the application that once they identify that source, they will provide us with the documentation so that we can include it in the public file so that members of the community and everybody know exactly where this water is coming from. I guess if they were to identify a source and at some point in time in the future, that water was no longer available to them, they would be faced with making some decisions. They would have to either identify a new source of water, or I guess if that was not an option, that could potentially impact the operation, how they operate, how much they're mining or processing at any given time. If that was the case, they may need to work with us on a revision, potentially. So that would be something that would be on our radar. But I'd say that this situation that we have would be no different than any of other applications, even ones that are not contested, where at this stage, the applicant just has not identified that. They still, I think, as we acknowledged, have to go through the county process. So, typically that would, I think, on a part of an operator, be one of the last things they do after they have assurance and approvals through all other agencies that the mining operation can move forward.
Just go ahead, just a little bit more. So I guess, my concern is that we're going to be satisfied that they're going to have adequate water before they're able to begin extracting. Is that correct?
Yes, it is. I think, we view that as really another permit, license, or approval that they need. That's separate and independent from our process. So it is something they will have to have. And again, we'll be asking for them to provide us with that documentation when the time comes.
Thank you.
Other board questions for the division?
Sir. Anything else we can enlighten the board on, provide additional information, whether that's wildlife or water or any of the other topics we discussed.
Okay, thank you. The applicant has time reserved as well, if you would like to proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Real briefly about the items that are non-jurisdictional that have been raised by the objectors. We would just say that, just because an item is non-jurisdictional doesn't mean it's, not important, right? We can see there are certainly important issues raised by the objectors. It's just a question of whether or not this is the appropriate forum to address those issues. And our contention, I believe the division would agree with us, is that this body is a body of limited statutory authority and has express criteria to review in consideration of an application. So traffic considerations on Highway 6 or on Clear Creek Parkway, impact to recreation, tourism, whether something is the best use of the land, whether it should be used for housing, the cumulative impact, all of those items are non-jurisdictional. They're not appropriately considered. Now, with respect to the water quantity issue and the impacts on wildlife, I believe that those are the main issues that were raised that would be jurisdictional. We'd be happy to address those. We could have Mr. Young and then maybe Ben Langenfeld address the water quantity issue, and then Mr. Young and Dave Blausch talk about the wildlife impacts as well.
Mark, do you want us to answer specific questions or just talk in general? What would the board like? Does the board have specific questions about water or about wildlife that they would like me to address?
Well, Bob, there was a question about the water rights and the leases that will be supplied to the division prior to the commencement of mining. So can you just speak briefly to your efforts to obtain water rights and where you are in that process?
I apologize. I was cut off internet-wise, so I had to get on my cell phone. So I might have missed a little bit there. But in terms of water, we have identified several sources of legal water for the project. And we have committed to DRMS to have a source of legal water in place prior to commencing the project. So one source of that water is potentially Central City. In partnership with Central City, if we do a water lease with them, it would be legal water that would be supplied to us for this project. I did notice that there were some comments about recreation, and I do want to just point out that we did take the Clear Creek corridor into consideration in a big way, because it's important to us as well. And we did leave a ridge line that buffers that from the quarry operation, which we felt was important.
Thank you, Bob. With regards to the impact on wildlife, we have Dave Blausch from ERC, who's available here. And then Mr. Young, you can also testify about the additional mitigation steps that are taken in terms of fencing and wildlife crossings, the improvements that are going to be also installed in connection with this project that wouldn't be there, but for this application.
Okay, so when we commissioned the wildlife study, we had them look at the entire 6.5 miles that we adjoin the Central City Parkway. And in looking at that and in studying that, the biologist recommends certain infrastructure over time, some of which is wildlife fencing that helps direct the wildlife to more concise areas where they would cross. And that's for the entire 6.5 miles of the parkway. So some of those crossings, we've committed to one crossing being an overpass, which would be, for bighorn sheep and other wildlife. We've committed to a lot of wildlife fencing over time and wildlife escape routes. So there's ramps like you would see on CDOT roads so that wildlife can get off of the parkway. So in general, we feel like we are in a position where we have the ability, because of this project, to address some of the items of wildlife concern along the parkway that haven't been addressed to date. And if there's any questions, I'm happy to speak directly to questions as well.
Hi again, Lauren from Vineland Board. Can you speak to, and maybe ERC can as well, speak to some of the cumulative impacts? I'm sure that did not escape your notice. So if we can address that directly, I appreciate it. Oh, you're muted.
I will have Dave speak to that.
Sure. Dave Block with Ecological Resource Consultants. I'm a senior ecologist with the company working on this project. We did do a comprehensive analysis of all the wildlife movement based on CPW mapping and actually on-site activity. And the cumulative impacts are something that we have to look at, taking into consideration everything from Central City Parkway, I-70, other pits in the area, other residential areas. And we do take a look at that. One of the key things that we looked at here is maintaining east-west movement. And with the deed restricted wildlife movement corridor, that was one of the biggest issues that we thought in maintaining kind of regional movements through the area. So maintaining that east-west corridor and also habitat for the bighorn sheep. So when we look at the cumulative impacts, we look at what's going on in the area, what the typical movement patterns are, and then that's how we develop the mitigation plan. So hopefully that somewhat addresses your questions. If it's something more specific, we can talk about specific species or specific areas, but taking a look at the overall area and then what we have done and how we've put those mitigation elements together is taking into consideration the cumulative impacts throughout the area.
Thank you. And then one more question regarding water quality. Can you talk a little bit about your discharge plan here?
Yes, I think we'll have Ben Langenfeld speak to that.
Hello, this is Ben Langenfeld with the applicant, the hydrologist on this project. So you're asking, just to clarify, you're talking about the surface water discharge points. There are 3 of them as a plan in this project, 2 going to the north and 1 going to the south. If I could here, I'm actually going to just bring up a little image for the board's reference that shows their location in the operation here. Just a moment. Share my screen. Everybody can see that now. You see this map that shows the discharge point locations. Based on this is an image of the operation at the latter phases of mining around phase 5, but it's a good image to show these different discharge points. So we have 2 discharge points to the north off of the waste rock landform. So these will collect and sample any water that's passing down that slope or is draining out of that slope on the bedrock contact of any kind prior to leaving the affected area. And this will allow us to obviously check for any presence of sediment or anything like that that can come with surface mining, but also will act as a final compliance point to ensure that all of our activity on the waste rock landform and the associated mining is not producing any pollutants that it's releasing off site. So those are the 2 to the north. We have to have 2 because we have 2 different drainages that we're actually constructing this waste rock landform in. So we'll sample each of those in turn from the beginning of the construction of this landform. So starting from phase 2, when we first start filling in these valleys, we'll have that discharge point. Those will each be part of a discharge permit with the Department of Public Health and Environment. Same goes for the 3rd discharge point, which is on the south side of the quarry. That actually only comes into play at the very end of mining, where the last portion of mining sort of pushes, there's a road that exits going to the south, a mine road, and that will then create a discharge point there that we will monitor primarily at the very end of mining and transitioning into reclamation as the final reclamation takes place and the vegetation is growing, and just lets us again monitor for the same kind of pollutants of concern you have with surface mining, sediment, iron, those sorts of things. And again, that'll be part of a discharge permit with CDPHE. Does that answer your question in general, Lauren?
Yes, thank you.
Other questions from the board? Okay. Mr. Corman, please jump in if I am out of order at all here with the process, seeing as we changed it up a bit here, but I believe at this point we should be close testimony and open this up for any board deliberation. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
That works.
So we'll close testimony, and here's any board discussion, board deliberation on the matter before entertaining a motion.
I just want to say I'm really impressed with all the pre-planning that's gone into this application. I think when you look at the detail that's gone into it, specifically like, you know, vegetation types and specific species being called out, to me that's pretty clear that someone has put in the time and the effort to really think through what they're doing and how they're doing it and how the land will be left afterwards. So I just want to say I appreciate the time, the considerable expense, I'm sure, and the real genuine effort on the applicant's part.
I agree. Mr. Singletary?
I'd like to say, I agree with that. I think it's a very comprehensive consideration of a plan, but I understand the angst of those objectors, and that's why we have a process that we have that an applicant has to get permits from more than one area, and that's why counties have land use regulations and we don't, and so that gives them the objectors the opportunity to present their case in front of, it looks like, both Gilpin and Clear Creek counties, but I think it's a very fair and good proposal, and I would support it.
Thank you. I think that's a great point, Mr. Singletary. I know that sometimes it does feel like, you have to start somewhere, right? You have to come to some division. I don't think that it is prescriptive as to whether or not you go to a county first before you come to the state or vice versa. But in this sense, as they move along in the process, because of the level of detail that is in this application, hopefully that helps to better inform the other, whether it's a county, whether it's CDPHE or air quality or anything else going through. You have a lot of information here. So for the objectors, just do know that this is a very comprehensive, path, and that the applicant has really, to Lauren's point about the seed mix, this is not something we always see this level of detail in an application. Certainly not going above and beyond something with, the wildlife corridor. I'm sort of flabbergasted to hear that it's taking a proposed mine to take into account the considerations of something going on the Central City Parkway. That was certainly news to me. I would have thought that would have been taken care of when the parkway was put in place. So, I know it doesn't make you feel necessarily all of your concerns alleviated when you're the objector, but do know that this is a pretty comprehensive packet moving forward here, if it goes on to other stages or other counties.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I'm really encouraged the CPW's been so involved, especially, conducting a site visit. I don't know how frequently that happens, but that feels like a one-off to me. I wish they had submitted a letter. I'm a little disappointed to see that, for like the effort that they've put in, the time that they've put in, obviously the time the objectors and the applicant have put into this. It's disappointing not to see something in writing from them that would say, yes, we've considered, the actions being taken by the application, as well as, what else is going on in the area. And even calling out, like you said, Ms. Ram, like the more positive things of, ramps and fencing, which do not exist right now. I would have loved to see a little bit more formal recognition of that from their behalf, but that's no fault of anyone's here.
Other board comments or discussion?
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Tim Mock, I would agree. I think this is a pretty straightforward application in regards to our jurisdictional oversight. And then as a former county commissioner, I do think that I would agree with the other comments here, certainly those of Mr. Singletary, that this is a process. We all have separate jurisdictional items to look after, and that a lot of those that are raised here will be taken up by the counties if this moves forward. So I'm in support of this application.
Thank you. Any other comments or any board members who would like to entertain a motion?
Anthony Lobato. I move we approve the 112C permit application for the Young Ranch Resource Quarry, file number M2021-009.
Seconded, Patrick Ortiz.
Thank you. Any discussion? Okay. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Hearing none, the motion passes. Thank you all very much for your time and respect of each other on this call, on this Zoom call. And with that, it is just about 11 o'clock here. We've got one more item on the agenda and then possibly some discussion items. Would folks like maybe a 10-minute break? And certainly those of you who were here for this most recent item number 6, you're welcome to leave if you'd like to. You're welcome to stay and join us. But we will be moving on to item number 7 when we return at 11:10, if that's all right with everyone. Yep. Okay. See you then. Sounds like we got the recording back on and the streaming back on. Is that correct?
Yep, we're good to go. As soon as everybody jumps
Okay.
back on here.
Yep, just looking for Lauren's room over there. I'm sure they'll just turn their camera on in a second.
Same with DRMS. We want to wait for them too.
Fair enough.
There we go.
All right, is that everyone? Do you wait for Mr. Fugate or anything?
I think we're good right now.
Okay.
Right, Chuck? What do you think? Oh, there we go.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, this is really just a board discussion item. No presentations or anything at this point.
Okay, sounds good. So moving along here, this is item number 7. As Chuck just pointed out, this is pretty straightforward board action regarding file number M-1978-208. And it's just there's a request for a declaratory order that was received, and the topic of discussion is really whether or not to consider the order. So this is just up for, I really think all we need to discuss is whether or not we want to consider, or really it's whether or not we're going to rule on this petition.
Yeah, and I'm happy to answer any questions the board might have about the rules and sort of what where we're at on a decision tree provided for by Rule 2.5, which covers petitions for declaratory order. So just let me know.
Yeah, and I think, as Chuck pointed out there, 2.5.3 really lists out sort of, if someone were to submit a declaratory order, what is it solving? Is there anything that's helpful in discussing this? Does it really resolve anything? I would, say that I don't think that it really raises any helpful solutions to any concerns she may have, and I don't see that moving forward with this declaratory order actually helps anything that she's trying to achieve here.
Yeah, Madam Chair, this is Patrick Ortiz. I agree that it seems very reaching on trying to solve a separate matter that the rule really isn't addressing in this concern. So I also think we should deny that request as well.
Agreed.
Mr. Lovato, did you have something to say? No.
I disagree with the comments.
Yeah. Any further discussion, or would someone like to entertain a motion?
Yeah, and to kind of help the board out, I think where you're at under the rules, a motion at this point would be to either not consider the petition or to consider the petition. You don't have to go into the merits of granting or denying it. This is really just that threshold decision of, should the board consider the petition on the merits or should it not? And, the way you would kind of construct a motion here would just be, move to not consider the petition or move to consider the petition. It doesn't have to be anything more complicated than that.
Okay.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, this is Lauren. I move that we deny, or I move that we do not consider the petition for a declaratory order as submitted by Elk Creek Sand and Gravel.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Mock and Ms. Duncan. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, same sign. Okay, hearing none, the motion carries. And thank you for that consideration and guidance under kind of a complicated factor, but I think that the rules do really delineate, you know, what could have been achieved there. So number 8, we've got some staff information, education items, anything that wanted to be presented there? Mr. Means?
Let me find my unmute button here and stuff, and that my apologies and stuff. I sound croaky and stuff, and I do wish it was pollen and stuff that had a hold of me. But I have COVID and stuff, so it's just a wonderful time. So I'm looking to see if Zach Trujillo is joined in with us and stuff here. I think he's coming in and stuff here. So today we would like to present to the board what goes into calculating a financial surety. Often you hear, or you'll even ask if a bond is sufficient. We thought it would be beneficial for the board to understand that the work that goes on daily to ensure that financial warranties are up to date and current. So I want to introduce Zach Trujillo. Zach is our CERCES program specialist. Zach has been with the division for 10 years, and about 2 years ago, he took over this very, very important position for us. Zach has a presentation that's going to walk you through what the CERCES program is, what's behind that, and all of the work that goes into that. So did Zach show up here? I can't.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So
It says
Zach,
he's in the DRMS room.
okay. I will turn it over to Zach and we will go from there. Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't see him in there.
They're just figuring out their technical stuff.
Yeah. And while we have a second, thank you to the board for shifting gears really quick here to a virtual meeting. We're spending almost $50,000 on upgrades and stuff to sound and audio-visual equipment in 318, and it was supposed to be done by last week, but the contractor didn't quite get that done. So we had to make some shifts and stuff here really quick. So appreciate your efforts or your understanding of that. So Cammy, do we got him in yet?
He was here. I'm not sure what happened to him.
They look frozen, which also means they may be having a hard time unmuting and sharing.
Yeah, maybe.
He might be jumping into his office to join. I'm not quite sure.
Hey, Russ, certainly appreciate the fortitude. I'm sorry to hear about COVID, but please be sure to take care of yourself and well wishes here on a speedy recovery there.
All right, thanks and stuff. The last couple of days have been rough, but today's not too bad, so I'll take it. So, if we can't get Zach squared away here and stuff, and that we can certainly circle back around to this in August. I know that July we have a very big 112 with objections and that, so the board should be aware that that has the potential to be a day and a half or at a minimum and stuff. So just based on the number of objectors that we have. So, all right. I think good stuff in that. We'll see if Zach can get things done and stuff. I don't know. And we'll just finish up our other business and go from there. So,
Okay, sounds good.
yeah. All right.
Any public comment?
I don't believe there is now.
Okay, thank you. Any need for executive session, Mr. Corman?
No, I mean, I guess in terms of updates, this is public, so no need to go into executive session, but we did finalize the settlement with Fontenary and have dismissed the two judicial review cases regarding, or, that resulted out of enforcement actions that were before the board in 2019 and 2020. So those are all resolved at this point, and we just have one remaining judicial review case in the Court of Appeals involving snowcap that was appealed by the Fontenary Trust. That's scheduled, or oral argument's been scheduled in that case. We're fully briefed. Oral argument hasn't been set yet, but when it is, I'll let the board know. And not sure if they're still, I think Court of Appeals is still live streaming oral arguments. So if you're available and wanted to watch whenever it's scheduled, that'll be an option. So I'll keep you all up to date on that as well. And I guess to kind of close the loop on the rulemaking, that was the rules were submitted to the Secretary of State's. The Attorney General's office issued its rule opinion, and so those rules are going to go into effect. Russ, Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think in July is when it's tied to the date of publication by the Secretary of State's office. So that's all wrapped up, and I'm just kind of waiting for the administrative things to click over with the Secretary of State's office for those rules to become effective. So,
yeah, the publication date is June 25th, so the effective date would be July 15th, I think, is how it works out.
Thanks for those updates. Anything else while we're here together? I think we heard be on the lookout for a 2-day-ish meeting in July.
Yeah, and I just sent Zach the invite. He's going to do it in his cubicle because they're having technical difficulties in the minerals conference room.
Oh, sure. Okay. We'll stand by. At least the technology in that other conference room worked for the hearings. So.
Nothing worse than dead time. I just talked to Michael, and they're getting things squared away here really quick. So Well, we have a brief moment, I guess, while Zach's getting reconnected and stuff here. Are there other areas that the board would like to have a little bit more background on, as far as what their staff does, as far as reviews go in a particular area? I know we've talked a little bit about wildlife. There's I thought about maybe the possibilities of running through what the requirements are for public notice, because I know that that's been a conversation that the board has had and seems interested in, maybe going through and explaining all of the public notices and where it's tied into statute and rule might be something. We're looking for ideas. Also, so just so you're aware, there's a couple of CSSGA and I think CMA have also expressed interest in 15 minutes of your time and stuff, and that and we would defer to them for some conversations and stuff outside of formal conversations in front of the board. Is there any other subjects and stuff right now that you guys can think of?
I'm just curious if there's any contingency plans on like water scarcity for operations and how that might affect like reclamation and things like that. That was just something I thought about.
Okay, yeah, that's certainly something I think and stuff that we want to talk to our veg groups and stuff about, is as we're moving into this climate change and stuff and that and the droughts that we're having and stuff. Some of the considerations and stuff that we need to have for drought tolerant species and water availability and stuff. So, all right. It looks like, did we get him in here?
Yeah, they're trying.
All right.
There they are.
Oh, we'll let this go here in a second, but Russ, I do think it would be good to hear from definitely the public comment piece, but the industries as well. I think that, particularly, the board, but also the public side of things, understanding that undertaking any of these endeavors is no easy or cheap task. And so even though we're not the ones analyzing the economic drivers behind it, I think that if we could understand a bit where the state is moving, projects that are underway, I think, a lot of these historical projects are because of highways or airports or whatever that may be. And so while the reclamation piece is tied to the end use of the land, the need for certain projects is also tied to our current existence right now as well. And so hearing from the industry associations would, I think, be educational to all.
Okay. It doesn't look like we're having too much success with Zach and stuff and that. So I'm going to go ahead and call it here.
We're good.
Hey, Russ,
Oh.
we're
They're ready to throw you out with the trash. Okay.
Yeah, sorry about that. We had some technical difficulties, but I think Zach's ready to go. So,
all right, cool. All right. Again, this is Zach Trujillo. He is our CERC specialist, and we will let him, start his program.
All right, thank you, Russ. Yeah, as Russ has mentioned, my name is Zach Trujillo. I'm with DRMS. I am an engineer, and I've been with the DRMS now for 10 years, and just kind of asked to do a little introduction to reclamation cost estimating here that we do at the division. Can everybody see my screen okay?
Yes.
Okay. So kind of one things I want to go over were just kind of an introduction to reclamation cost estimating, the basis in law for both coal and mineral programs, the requirements of the operator and applicant, as well as what we do here at the division. Also going into some of the steps of the reclamation cost estimation, CERC's demonstration, and I'll go more into that and what CERC's is. Some of the behind the scene numbers in where we, the division, get our costs from, as well as some partnerships with other states and some of the future things that we're working on. So for coal, as part of the act, a bond is required to be held by the division, and that amount is necessary to be to complete the reclamation based on the reclamation plan. Goes a little bit more in specific with the Rule 2.054, Parent 2, Parent B, where it basically just states that the reclamation plan estimate is required. Rule 3.02.2 of the coal rules sets the standard for the determination of that bond amount. Similarly, going into minerals, the acts for both construction material and hard rock also require a bond amount to be held by the division. And similarly, that amount is necessary to complete the reclamation based on that plan. For construction materials and hard rock, Rule 6 basically states that the operator must provide those estimates as part of either their amendment or the application itself. Rule 4.2 just goes on into more detail about the amount necessary to complete reclamation. So in summary, the division is required to hold a reclamation bond amount. That bond amount, it needs to be sufficient enough to assure the completion of that reclamation based on the approved reclamation plan. And it must also take into consideration that that work is to be performed by the board or the division in the event of forfeiture. So the requirements of the operator, basically for minerals and as well for coal, that during new applications and revisions, they must supply those cost estimates. Unfortunately, the rules and regulations do not set a specific structure or format for these estimates. So oftentimes we will get a wide range or variety of estimates in detail. I'm just going to go into a couple of examples. Here's kind of one example of a very simple, not very detailed estimate. We have some costs for seed, drilling, and grading, plus some supplemental text saying that $50 per acre will be good enough. Generally, I would say we'd probably have a lot of questions in regards to this. Here's kind of a second example, goes a little bit more into detail compared to that first one. Here they've included some costs in regards to mobilization. Looks like some replace and grade overburden in soils and some re-veg costs. And something they also included were indirect costs, which are something that the division does require, which is an administrative contingency and bond forfeiture fee as well. So a little more detailed. And then going into an example 3, here we have a great example of a good estimate provided by an operator. Goes into a good detail of the reclamation activities needed to reclaim the site, in addition to each phase of that mine site proposed mining activities. Also doing a good breakdown of indirect costs, which they've included demobs, contingencies, engineers, etc. So these are all kind of just 3 examples of what I talked about earlier, of the wide variety of estimates we see here at the division with applications and revisions. So some of the common issues that we identify a lot of the times are generally just the task list is incomplete. They don't take into consideration some of the other reclamation activities that might need to be performed. Indirect costs, they may not include it, or they might not just have what we require. Sometimes if there's not enough detail, it might be confusing on the way that they're going about their estimates. And there are just general calculation errors that do occur. Also, another big thing is equipment and labor costs can sometimes be inadequate to reflect kind of the current economic conditions. So going into our estimates that we perform at the division. So the division has built and uses what is called the Colorado Integrated Reclamation Cost Estimating Software. And for short, it'll be referred to as CERCES. So CERCES uses a standardized cost estimation methodology. It does complete and gives a very nice task list that is very legible and easy to follow. Essentially, CERCES is a very powerful calculator. So it basically minimizes any mathematical errors that could occur by doing this by hand or other methods. Similarly, a degree of accuracy is achieved by it because it is a powerful tool and a calculator in some sorts. One of the great aspects of it, though, is it creates consistency and continuity, not only just from equipment to equipment or from task to task, but also from the estimator to estimator. So we have a lot of continuity and consistency between one estimator to the other, in terms of the estimation being performed. CERS, great documentation and transparency. The deliverable that CERCES creates that we give to the operator to kind of justify our end on our estimates is very thorough, very legible, and it goes through all the minute details that anybody may want to look for. And at the end of the day, all of these things combined, it creates a very defensible cost that we, the division, are able to defend. So kind of just going in, the basic steps that we kind of go through beginning to end in terms of when we're calculating these cost estimations. So the first step is really reviewing the permit or the new revision. This includes the approved, or I guess the accepted reclamation plan, maps, and also going into the details of the operator's estimates that are required themselves. The next would be a site inspection. Mineral sites, we do have to do a pre-operation inspection of the proposed plan. And in coal, for an active coal site, we are there monthly. So we have a good idea of whether or not on the ground things are reflecting what is being proposed. The next is kind of creating a task list of everything. You know, are we moving dirt from point A to point B? Are we needing to regrade so many acres? Are we needing to reseed so many acres? Things of that nature. Once we kind of have that task list kind of all encompassing of what is required for that site, we then can go about selecting the equipment or method for each of those tasks that we then created. So if we're hauling dirt, do we want to do that by a scraper? Do we want to do that by truck and loader? Or just whatever makes sense for that specific item. Next step, we calculate our quantities. Again, these come from the reclamation plan and maps that have been provided by the operator, or if the operator has provided themselves, we will double check that. Those will include kind of the volumes of material, the total areas that are being disturbed, you know, if things are being hauled, distances, or how far they're being pushed, as well as just grades, if it's going uphill or downhill, and to what degree. Then we will calculate basically what we call the direct cost of each task. That is going to be the cost that is associated specifically just for that task. If it is a dozer task, it'll be just the cost it takes for that dozer to operate for that amount of material for that duration. Then following up, once we have all of our direct tasks calculated for that whole site, we will then calculate what we consider the indirect costs. And these are kind of those back-end costs that the division and the operator, that the contractor, I should say, under the assumption the division is doing the work, would incur. So we also calculate those and include that in the total estimate. So just going to give you a quick little example of what kind of the background of just a cut and fill and spread work of maybe a dozer would look like and how we would go about it. So in the top left, here's just an easy example of how it would, what we would look at and what we would do in spreading topsoil from a stockpile in a plan view. Basically, we look at what the minimum push and maximum push and kind of figure out what that average. What we use is what I call the centroid to centroid method. Basically, we take the centroid of each area to the next, and that is generally going to be your average distance for that push in this example. This also goes into play with maybe some different types of shapes, as you can see in the bottom left of example 2, using that same centroid to centroid to get that average push distance. And again, we're seeing that in example 3. This can also be used in terms of a cut and fill example, which you can see in the bottom right. And this is kind of, maybe you could look at this as a pit backfill reslope of a high wall, so to say. So what is the centroid of that cut area and what is the centroid of that fill area? And we can use these kind of techniques to determine what an average push would be for these types of tasks. So there are some factors that influence productivity for pretty much all pieces of equipment. Here are some general, more popular examples of that. One is the equipment size and type. Obviously, bigger equipment can generally move more material, so you're going to get different productivity with that. What kind of push and haul distances are you doing? Obviously, the further away, the more time it's going to take, and so on. What the type of material is. So different materials have different swell factors, different weights, different capacities of some sort. So those also come into play. What is the slope? Are we pushing or moving material uphill, downhill, and also to what degree can have an influence on how, productive this equipment is moving. Another factor is elevation. Being in Colorado, we are at a higher elevation, so that can also impact the productivity of these machines. And finally, operator ability. An operator who's probably been doing it for 30 plus years will probably be more productive than somebody who's on the first day. So these are all kind of those things we take into consideration and that are implemented into CERCES. So here is a screenshot of what our dozer input screen would be as if we were doing a dozer task. So I'm going to go a little more into detail on this. So hopefully later on during an example, we can maybe go a little bit faster so you have a general idea of what we're kind of looking at. So again, this is for a dozer task. So here we can kind of just show who's the agency or organization that are creating this. That is the DRMS. What is this job for? What is this alluded to? Maybe it's Amendment 1, Technical Revision 2. That's where we would put this. And then what is the description of what this machine is doing? For this example, it's regrade pond slopes, material moved during regrade. Going down now to hourly equipment costs. Here you can pick how many shifts per day this piece of machine is going to be operating at. Right now, this thing is set to 1 hour shift per day, which is a general shift. And then what type of dozer are we using for this task? This drop down has an inclusive task all the way going, or machines going from a CAT D3 all the way up to D11, D12, I believe. But it has a multitude of equipment that are common for multiple types of reclamation activities, from small sites to big sites. For this specific example, it used a CAT D9. Now, if you look kind of directly to the right of it, here's you're going to see a cost breakdown for that specific machine. That's going to include ownership and operating costs, which you can see just to the right of it. And then also you can see a utilization factor to it just to the right of those as well. And what that is saying is, in that 8 hour shift, how often is this machine being utilized? For this example, it is working 100% of the time for that 8 hour shift. Moving to the left, this piece of equipment you can see has different types of attachments, which we take into considerations and for reclamation activities. So we can have a single shank or a multi-shank. Similar to the machine, those also have operating and ownership costs, as well as you can input a utilization for it. In this example, it was a 15%. So going down the breakdown cost, you can kind of see what the total unit cost per hour for the machine and for the associated attachment. And that'll kind of be that baseline cost for that piece of equipment. The next part is going into kind of what we talked about. The division will calculate kind of what those initial volumes are for that task. It'll be inputted there under the initial volume. There, for this example, a 93,000. And then the volume units of compact cubic yards, there are 3 different kind of inputs, which will kind of affect maybe the swell factor down the end. But there are 3 different ones that you can choose from. For this example, it is compact. Next, we go into material descriptions. What kind of material is the material being moved? Again, the material type comes into play because it has different weights, has different densities, has different swell factors. These are all things that come into consideration for, at the end of the day, how much material is going to be needed to move. So as you can see, for earth wet excavated, there is a swell factor associated with that, which I believe is 1.135. It is being covered up by my screen. I apologize, but I believe that's what it is, giving you a total volume. And again, some clarity that ends up that we show here is where are these sources being estimated from. In this case, the initial volume is done by the division, and that swell factor is pulled from the CAT handbook, which is from Caterpillar, the machine. The company that creates the machines, they provide a lot of this information that goes into efficiencies and as well as swell factors and things that go into the equipment themselves. So going down now to hourly production, again, going into the, what is that push distance for this example? It is 95 feet at a negative 15% grade. And then what altitude is it? For this example, it is 5,000 feet. So with all that information coming into play, you get an unadjusted hourly production. That's basically without any influences or inefficiencies that we kind of talked about earlier, which would include, some of these things like operator ability, types of materials, and so on. In a perfect world, we would be moving what is in that unadjusted hourly production. Now going to the right, you could see kind of the job correction factors. Those are those factors that we kind of discussed earlier. What is the operator skill? What kind of method is the dozer using? Dozers can use multiple methods that can increase efficiencies, whether it's slot dozing or whether they can do a tandem side-by-side dozing, things that can kind of help make in terms of efficiency. Xerces also implements kind of those things and takes into consideration. Also, what is the conditions of the day? What is the visibility? Is it an average day? Is it rainy? Is it foggy? These are kind of things that could impact, I guess, the efficiency of how this operation could go. So once it goes down the lines of these job correction factors, it will then be applied to that unadjusted hourly production rate I kind of discussed earlier and apply it to what is then calculated now to the adjusted unit production, which is what we are using to calculate the total job time, as well as the total cost based upon the cost of that equipment to operate. So I know that was a lot of information, but this just goes to show the kind of detail that Xerces goes into when calculating not only just this task, but all the tasks going forward. So now that was for the direct cost of a dozer. Now kind of going a little more into detail for indirect costs. So indirect costs take into consideration of two overlying things: the contractor's overhead and profit, as well as the DRMS administrative expenses. So for a contractor, they're required to have a liability insurance, as well as a performance bond, and they will also incur the cost of a superintendent on site. And like most companies, they will want a profit. So these are all costs that we take into consideration on our end and include that into the estimate. And then also going into detail on what the expenses that DRMS would incur would be the financial warranty processing. What would be the cost for us to actually pull that liability bond and to get that money to put this job to work. Also takes into consideration of contracts and work-specific preparations, as well as reclamation management, kind of the cost that we would take on to get this site get this project ready for bid. So those are all additional costs that we take into considerations in addition to direct costs for each task. So now I'm just going to do a quick example of what a easy or just a simple estimation might look at. What you're seeing here is just a partial screenshot of our cost summary sheet. So for this example, you can see we have 4 tasks, and then I'll obviously see the task descriptions, the type of equipment or type of task at hand, the fleet size, how long it'll take for that task to happen, as well as the direct costs. Again, I want to say direct costs because that'll come into play later, but the direct costs associated with each one of those tasks. So going on to task 1. So this first task is, again, what we kind of went over earlier, a dozer task. So we kind of went over that. So hopefully I can kind of go through this a little bit quicker. So for this example, we used a CAT D8. And again, you can see the associated ownerships and operating costs associated with that specific piece of equipment, as well as utilization and the attachment associated with it. Again, the inputs that we would put in based upon the reclamation plan would be the quantities, units, and material descriptions to get a loose volume. Continue on, just lower things, we then would implement, again, how far are we pushing this dirt, what's the grade, altitude, and some of those job condition correction factors to get a job time and total job cost for the dozer task, which you can see at the bottom right, 1.5 hours at $330. Moving forward to what we saw earlier as task 2. This task is looks like to topsoil the affected area. So this task is specific to the scraper. So for this, we are using a scraper to load and haul topsoil to point A to point B. So again, it's a little bit similar to the dozer task where we select your pieces of equipment. For this, we're using a CAT 627G with push-pull, which is an attachment that can be applied to a scraper. And then if you move to the right, you can kind of see some of the, support equipment that we could also add to it, a push dozer. So kind of what I talked about earlier with dozers, there's certain techniques that operators can use to kind of help efficiencies. One being with a scraper, you can attach a dozer to it to help pull it to more efficiently load. So Xerces does take into consideration some of these extra things that can also help efficiencies as well. Moving down a little bit, support equipment at a load area or a dump area. For the load area in this example, we're not putting any support equipment. But if a task for a scraper would want that, we have the option to adding it. At the dump area, it looks like we've included a dozer to help kind of manipulate that, whatever that scraper is offloaded to help regrade, it appears. Additionally, to the right, you can see grader and water truck. Those are also some support equipment that we can add. The grader can be used to kind of help maintain the road in order to make that haul route more stable and effective for that machine to move. The water truck similar, just keeping that road maintained. So again, going down to a cost breakdown, here you can give a detailed breakdown of utilization of the scraper, in which it would include that ownership and operating costs, as well as any attachments if necessary. Also, on top of that, all that support equipment we talked about earlier, as you can see at the dump area, we had that dozer that we attached to it, using it at a 50% utilization rate and the costs associated with that dozer. And then again, similarly with the grader. The bottom end, you'll see a summary of that total fleet or that total work team and what that would cost per hour for just the team itself for that task. Continuing on with scrapers. Now, again, similar to dozers, you can see we could do an initial volume calculation in terms of volume units and material descriptions, which then can give us that loose volume. And then again, applying some of those job correction factors, similar to what we do with dozers, you can then work your way through. And then it'll calculate a cycle time for what it would take the scraper to not only to load, but also to maneuver and spread. Something that scrapers then do is also have the haul capabilities. So not only do they load and dump, they also have the haul opportunity. So part of the calculation with this specific task is figuring out, one, the road condition, because the road condition can dramatically impact the efficiency of how the scraper will move. If it is muddy and terrible conditions, it's obviously not going to move very quickly. But if it's a well-maintained road, then obviously it'll move a lot more efficient. So this is something that we take into consideration when doing, at least with it specifically for the scraper and other haul tasks. So now we kind of determine from our maps and the reclamation plan kind of what a haul route might be for this specific task. For this example, we have a haul route of 400 feet at no grade with a roll resistance of 4%, which is determined earlier by our road condition description, which kind of impacts, again, the efficiency of how that scraper will maneuver. And then on the way, and that gives you a total time, at least just a haul of what you see as a 0.33 travel time. And then again, for the return route, you can make it the same, or it doesn't necessarily have to be, again, just depending on the operation necessary, but the return route is at 0.27. So because it is offloaded at this point, it's obviously going to travel at a better rate. So it takes that into consideration. Moving down, kind of summarizes what the total time it'll take for that scraper to perform in terms of load, haul, maneuver, spread, and return. So rinse and recycle, that whole process, and what it was now going to cost for that to happen. Again, for this task, moving along, require 2 scrapers. That will then be doubling the total price for that total unit. When with all those factors for this specific task, you're going to see a total job time down below of 4 hours and $3,200 roughly dollars for that task. So that kind of just shows a breakdown of what goes into just a scraper specific task. Next, we're going into revegetation. So this is kind of a summary screen of what our revegetation task looks like. It's a pretty basic. You're essentially just establishing what the number of acres you're going to be reseeding and what failure rate are we expecting for that seed. So not all the seeds obviously going to germinate and revegetate. So we have to take into consideration the potential of reseeding the areas of failure. And as you can see in the bottom left, there are some additional tabs which kind of go into more detail on what's behind the general revegetation task that we create based upon the reclamation plan. So this is, again, looking at the fertilization task. So if you look at the top left, we have two basic general categories, granular and soil. If you select one, it'll bring up all the options for granular, or it'll bring up all the options for soil, which you see directly to the right. These are a comprehensive list of different types of fertilize that we will use or can use at a site, again, based upon the reclamation plan. And then in this example, we chose manure for a fertilization material, and then applied a unit per acre to that and a cost associated with that, as well as you could see on the cost breakdown on the far right. So something we take into consideration is how this manure is actually being applied. Down below, you can see that there's 4 different, for this specific example, of different types of application methods. For this specific example, we used a tractor spreader, and what you're seeing in parentheses next to it means 32 with some numbers. That again is referring to where that value came from, which I'll go into a little more detail later. And so then it then summarizes a total cost for what it would take to fertilize for this task. Moving a little bit more into tilling, similar to what we saw here, we have some options of tilling. And then for this example, we chose disc harrowing for 6-inch deep. And again, there's the reference to it, and then the cost per acre with the cost breakdown for the tilling task associated with it. Next is seed. So the division has a very large and intensive library of pretty much every seed, shrub, tree that would be expected in Colorado, as well as reclamation plans for Colorado. Above, you can see just a little bit of what we have for grasses. If you select one of those grasses, like the bent grass, which you see up top, it'll then go into further detail on what type of bent grass. Unfortunately, it does not show that in the middle part, but if you clicked on bent grass, it would then go on to the different variations of bent grass that exist. And then what you can then do is go through all the different seeds, find the matching seed mix, pull it over into and create a seed mix that matches what is required or what is approved with the reclamation plan, along with the rate or the PLS per acre for that specific seed grass. And then again, similar to what we saw with other things, there is an application method. You can see the different types. We have air, broad, drill, hydro, and different tractor methods. For this example, we use drill seeding along with the reference to it, which in this case was a DRMS survey cost. So then again, on the right, you will see a cost breakdown for just the seeding alone. Going further on to mulching and miscellaneous. So these are our more options. And again, these are only part of the options that are shown in this screenshot. But again, if you chose to use some mulching or other miscellaneous things that wasn't covered in some of these previous screens, you can kind of find it here. In this example, we're going to have straw and it'll be delivered at 2 units per acre with an application method of crimping with tractor. Again, a total cost per acre summarized below. We then have a tab sheet for nursery stock planting. So if for whatever reason trees need to be reestablished or more established shrubs need to be planted, we do have a way to account for those types of costs as well, and including all the different types of trees and shrubs that would be found here in Colorado. For this specific site, we do not have a nursery stock planting. So if the reclamation plan does not call for any of these tasks, they do not need to be implemented. But going back to the screen, all those different tabs that I kind of just briefly went over are now what implemented in that total cost per acre. And then those are then included by the number of acres to kind of give you that total job cost and job hours. So that is how we go about calculating the cost for revegetation of a disturbed area. And the final task in our example that we showed earlier was the mobilization and demobilization. So what this is the cost that the division would incur for having to transport or to move equipment from point A to the actual job site itself. So a lot of this equipment are obviously very large and they are not street legal, so they will need to be hauled. And so there are costs that are incurred or that are needed to move those pieces of equipment to the site. Here you can kind of see a general cost for that transport rig. So what it's going to And a lot of the tractors, truck tractors and the trailers associated are going to be based upon the total weight, which you can see kind of a breakdown on the available rig capacities. So the costs kind of vary depending on how heavy the piece of equipment is and what type of tractor truck will be needed because of the weight of that piece of machinery being transported. So going down to the bottom of the screen, you can kind of see a detailed list of all the pieces of equipment that we just now are going to be using for all the previous tasks we talked about. So we have a dozer task. We're going to be regrading it. So we have the Cat D8 in there. We had a scraper task. So now we've incorporated that Cat 627G. We had a motor grader, a support equipment. So we're going to detail all those pieces of equipment that we used earlier and make sure that we have costs that will take to transport that cost. Now, some equipment we can actually drive, so there won't need to be those transport costs necessarily. So that's what we'll see here in the rotable equipment. So for this example, we moved a light duty pickup truck, which can easily be driven, as well as a fuel tanker to kind of support and fill up the operations as it's maintaining. Some of the things that we input will be the transport cycle times. How long is it going to take us to offload those equipments from the transport trailers? Also, how long of a haul distance is it going to come from? What is the nearest major city that equipment potentially could be traveling from and to the project site? In this example, it was Sterling with a distance of 27 miles at about an average 55 mile an hour. So it takes into consideration all those costs and summarizes them and creates a total job time and a total job cost associated with just the mobilization and demobilization of the equipment to and from point A to point B. So again, going back to the direct cost summary, as you can see here, this just summarizes all those little tasks that we just kind of went through. We have the dozer task, the scraper task, the re-veg task, and the mobilize task. Going on next, and going to kind of talk about the indirect costs that are those back-end costs that I kind of discussed earlier. So the overhead and profit, so these are kind of just blanket, some of these are just blanket percentages like the liability insurances, performance bonds of 1.5%, the direct costs. We also take into consideration having a job superintendent at a certain cost per hour, and that is also taken into head. Again, there's profit that the contractor will want to take, so we also include that into our costs. And then that total contract amount for a contractor is now summarized there in the contract amount of $29,800 roughly for this example. Now, kind of the back-end costs, that DRMS administrative things that we want to take consideration would be that what does it cost to pull the bond? For this example, we used a corporate surety, which would be about $500. And again, what are the engineering work, contract bid prep, as well as reclamation management, administration percentage contract fees based upon the amount or the size of this job. So this kind of details a little bit of what we're taking into consideration on the back end costs that the division would incur in terms of getting this out to bid and really out to get to the reclamation part of it. So in total, with the direct and the indirect, you can see the summary down below of $34,715 for this entire example. So we just did 4 kind of examples of 4 just generally reclamation tasks, but we also have a plethora of other different activities from air tools, blasting, boreholes, demolition, loaders, lifting, excavators, you name it, pretty much every type of equipment that you would expect to need or activities that you would need in terms of a reclamation of a mine site. So this allows us to really make this specific to the job, depending on the needs of the job. So where does the division get its numbers? So we get a lot of our numbers from third-party sources that are published. The cost reference guide, which is done by Equipment Watch, again, is kind of like that rental blue book. And what they do is they do nationwide surveys to kind of find that average of what does it cost to own and operate each piece of equipment that we have in Xerxes. And we take those ownership and operating costs for a specific piece of equipment, and we incorporate that into CERCES. Another one is RS Means. That is an annual public or published reference book that is used widely. And these include some of those other costs of like tasks, which would include demolition costs, detoxification, ceilings, and some of the revegetation costs. And again, so some of those references we talked about earlier, these are kind of what they're referring to are these publications. So the division also does surveys, Colorado specific surveys for different parts of the state, kind of get an all-encompassing average costs that are directly related to Colorado. And a big cost of that is seeds and planting. So that big list of seeds and replanting tasks and that we kind of talked about earlier, we call a handful of distributors and providers, and we get their numbers, and we, for each seed that we have in our system, and average that out. So we get a very specific to Colorado kind of cost for those. In terms of operator rates, we use Davis-Bacon wages, which are annual government wages, and we specifically use those that are used with CDOT. We also use the inactive mine program costs. So when they get bids, they summarize all the costs for specific tasks, and they summarize those and provide it to me, which then also gets incorporated into CERCES and those costs. So we update these costs annually. And so from all those guides and all the surveys, we make sure to have CERCES up to date with current costs annually. All those costs go into our internal database, which will then be uploaded around every spring to early summer into CERCES. So actually, it's kind of been the general thing of late to every year at July 1st, all these new costs will go into play for the new year. So actually, in a couple of weeks, we will be seeing new cost updates with CERCES. So moving forward, some of the things that we are currently working with CERCES and other states. So Montana has actually shown interest in using CERCES themselves. The Montana Department of Environmental Quality, we've been working with them as of late, starting in 2021, where we've actually given them access to CERCES for their use. And in return, they are actually developing a web-based version of CERCES. So eventually CERCES is planned to be online. So something we're doing is that, and that's begun in 2021. And so as of now, everything is on schedule, working with Montana, and they're the ones kind of developing the web-based application of it. So testing of that for us will begin in 2024. And hopefully by 2025, this will be usable online. And the idea behind this is to make this available to operators. So that gives them more opportunity to kind of work with it. Again, it just creates greater clarity. There's a lot of streamlining that could occur. We understand that these numbers are accurate. We know where they come from. So it's a great tool for both the operators and just on our end in the review aspect of it. So ideally, moving forward, we're going to have CERCES available on the web for operators to use and to see. So that is the end of that. Do you guys have any questions for me?
Will the public have access to utilizing this platform once it is online?
I'm not entirely sure if public will have access at this point in time. So I know that the idea of this was originally for the operators. That's probably something that is in discussion because again, the transparency of it, and we're very confident in it. So I don't have any issues with it personally, but again, this goes to a decision above me that I don't know, that I haven't been part of that discussion yet. So potentially, but as of now, I'm not sure.
Great, thanks. It just seems like it could be a universal tool for any type of construction or really project management. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Russ Means,
hey, Jim Stark here. I've been working with Zach and the group with OSM on this web-based program. And one of the problems, one of the issues, if you will, we've been trying to get this out to operators for, I want to say 2 decades now. one of the issues has been some of the copyrighted materials that we use, means cat handbook, the equipment watch information. So going broad-based to the public could cause problems with the copyright and the licensing of that. OSM is going to get blanket licenses for a certain number of users. They have other software like SEDCAD, Aquasolve, kind of these other programs that we use where you're allowed a certain number of licenses. So you go and you check a license out, use the product, and then when you're done with it, the license goes back. So that could be one of the problems with doing it for the general public at this point. Again, the feds are involved, so who knows what they're going to come up with.
This is Russ Means, and to kind of add on to that, one of the things that we've always tried to do and stuff is to have some coordination between federal agencies and the division when it comes to bond calculations. BLM, for instance, has several different methods. Each state has its own way of doing it. In conversations with the BLM here in Colorado, they're itching to get their hands on this and stuff so that we actually have the same program so that we can talk apples to apples when we're doing bond calculations instead of trying to meld together two different systems. So we're looking forward to that. It's been something that's been on our wish list for a long time. So we're looking forward to that as well.
Yeah. Can I ask the obvious question about how accurate your final figures usually are compared to the real world?
Well, they vary. As you can see, some of those earlier examples we used where you kind of get not a whole lot. I've generally found that on some of your more detailed things, I've worked on some bigger ones that the operators have provided that we've been pretty close in the relative ballpark area. There's been some, and at that point it becomes kind of splitting hairs and kind of going over some different numbers, but I'm fairly confident, pretty confident in a lot of these more accurate that the ones that the operators have provided us that we're relatively close to.
Yeah, we always did break evens on whether to sell or retain heifers, and then came up with the figure and then just added 10%.
Yeah.
This is Lauren. I've got a couple of questions for you too. What's the process for like revising the types of categories or what's being included? So what the factors are for these cost estimates? If the contractor comes back to you and says, oh, but you ever thought about how many trees they have to remove to build the access road to get there, what have you, whatever that detail is. Can they just work directly with you and then that's something that gets incorporated like the next July? Or is that something that would require kind of like review by multiple parts of the agency or the board or anything like that?
So if I'm hearing your question correctly, are you referring to maybe some of these tasks that maybe we don't have in CERCES, and how do we incorporate that, or can we implement that? Is that, am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, and or detail that isn't specified within CERCES that could bump up costs or could adjust them in some way.
Yeah, so we review basically their reclamation plan as we kind of talked about. So if we see items that necessarily they didn't take into consideration or that we feel needs to be taken into consideration, then through the adequacy process, we kind of have a little bit of a back and forth and ideally kind of see eye to eye where we're both coming from and kind of figure out what makes sense. And if the operator makes a valid point, then we definitely take that into consideration. But at the end of the day, our job is to ensure that the public, that the funds to perform the reclamation, to ensure that there's public safety, environmental safety, that the state has those funds in-house to perform that reclamation work. But during an adequacy process, there is a degree of back and forth that we can kind of see eye to eye eventually at the end of the day.
Great. Yeah, thank you. I'm sorry, I was unclear. I mean, specifically in the program itself. So if you look at it and say, oh, we needed to add another tab to one of your spreadsheets.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have a guy on the back end who actually is our programmer that does these construction things. So if we have the funds and he has the time available, we do have the potential, there's the potential to exist. And we've done this in the past with certain tasks that have come up that we necessarily that weren't part of the original aspect. So there is a degree of that we can build it onto it more down the line if there are things that we feel are necessary. Yes, sorry about that.
Oh, yeah, yeah. And that could be kind of an iterative process. It doesn't have to go through like a, review period or something like that, right?
I think generally speaking, it's just dependent on management approval and whether or not we can kind of get that workflow to go through with our contractor and everything. But after that's done, then there will be a degree of testing, obviously, to make sure that everything is working properly before we start implementing those into our live in reclamation cost estimates.
Great. A couple more for you, if I can just hog your time. What's the adjustment process for the bond estimates if conditions change or prices change, kind of in a short-term sense, right? Like you calculated the bond, whatever, in 2020, fairly recently using the same program, but gas prices have changed so considerably.
Yeah.
Or, road conditions really deteriorated since when you calculated the bond when they're actually going to get the equipment out there. Like, what's that?
Right. So with coal, so speaking of coal specifically, the rules and requirements have us address and redo a site-wide reclamation cost estimate every 2.5 years. So there's a midterm and a renewal for coal. So every 2.5 years, we will actually go through and we will readjust due to inflation, or if they've gotten bond release on, they've performed their duties in reclamation and they've got approval, we will take those out. So we will adjust in coal every 2.5 years, but we also have the power, if necessary, to also reevaluate it at some point based on the rules and regulations. Now with minerals for the sites, I believe after every inspection, we do review it. So depending on the frequency of the mineral inspection requirement, after that inspection, we will come back into the office, reevaluate their reclamation plan and what's on the ground and adjust it then. And if they need additional bonds, we will then address that with the operator at that time.
Okay. So it's not going to be sort of like a real-time adjustment of, gas prices changed so considerably this month or what have you. It's going to be just based on those timelines and sort of the inspections.
Yeah, those are the general trigger points. We'll reevaluate the site. But again, these numbers get updated every year, once a year, every year. And like I said, July 1st will be this coming year's update.
Yeah. Okay. And then last question, is local permitting included in the indirect costs?
Local permitting. So in terms of, the indirect cost is going to be kind of those, taking into consideration what the contractor will want and what they will have to have, some of those percentages of liability insurance. Obviously, they're going to want some profit and other things. And then for the division, it's those incurred costs from pulling the bond and what it's going to take our personnel to actually get this project out to bid in that nature. So in terms of local permitting, I'm not familiar on what you're referring to, I guess.
For example, a project of Guanella Pass, we had to pay Clear Creek County in order to haul equipment up Guanella, just because they've incurred damage over the years, and so now they're requiring anyone who has to haul equipment to pay for that. So is that something that would be included in some way?
Yeah, so maybe I didn't go, maybe I kind of flashed over it, but if you recall the example of the mobilization, demobilization, where I kind of talked about hauling that equipment, there are actually CDOT fees associated, which are determined by the type of equipment and how heavy that piece of equipment is. And so those are taken into consideration in specifically the mobilization, demobilization task.
Okay. So yeah, and so I hear CDOT fees, and I'm sure that could also include county, town, or what have you. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. And then the last question, is there any space for like a trial methodology or a new BMP or a, hey, let's try out something here and see how well it works? Or is it these are really based around the tried and trues of we're going to regrade, we're going to put on some topsoil and revegetate?
Yeah, so there are ways to kind of go about and mirror kind of what the operator is trying to propose. I didn't go into every single tab, kind of like because it would take 2 days, because that's how long our training lasts. But, if they want to implement something like a best minimum practice, whether it's putting down silt fences or creating rock checks or something, there are, and specifically for those examples, there are in our demolition tabs that kind of go into that. And our demolition sheet is another very extensive and comprehensive one that wasn't included in this example, but takes into consideration some of those odds and ends or some of those alternative practices, or we can find maybe an equivalent to that would make sense.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thanks.
Just more of a comment piece. It was interesting to see the complexities of that. And while I know that the bond's not meant to be punitive for an operator, you can really see why there's significant advantages to doing this for the operator to continue to do this work either concurrently or following, the mine. You have the equipment already there, you have the operators already there, the space, you're not moving things around. Certainly, your hauling and your efficiency sounded like my morning meetings. So it was, it is a mining operation, right? You're on there. So hopefully, I think that really comes across in motivating operators to do this while, in the appropriate time frame under their permit. So Thank you. That was a great presentation. And I'm sure that was just the tip of the iceberg. There's a ton of information there. And I think you all sort of answered my question, but would you say that this is some of the more, I don't know, one of the better programs within the state or the feds, that it sounds like folks are looking to this as the example, as a best practice?
Yeah, I'm not aware of what other programs have, but I know we've worked with OSM, and I believe Russ or Jim kind of talked about BLM kind of, hey, can we also get attached to this so that we can talk apples to apples? So, and also Montana is well aware of our program as well. In fact, they're implementing it into their program as well as helping us out by creating and allowing us to this web-based application. So I don't know if this is the best program in the world, but I know it's a very great program. And yeah, we've been using it for 20 plus years and gone through the defense of it. And so it's a very all-inclusive and very good tool to have.
Yeah, if I can add on to that, it's about the only program as comprehensive as it is. You can get, CAT has like, what is it, DOE's sim, and they've got some earth moving programs that can calculate costs and whatnot for earth moving. But as far as a totally inclusive program that has earth moving and re-veg and demo and all these parts to it, channel reconstruction, it's pretty much the only game in town. And again, we've developed this over close to 30 years here at the division. So it's quite comprehensive. And again, other states have tried, they've looked at it, and that's really the reason the feds are using our program and kind of taking it over as their own. So.
Well, great work. Thank you so much. That was very educational. Anything else, Russ, on the order of educational updates from the division?
No, that's it. And just to add in one last thing and stuff, a lot of times the stuff what comes before the board when you see something that's insufficient bonding is because an operator has been in distress, or if there's a really, really large increase or something, it's because the operator hasn't followed the mine plans that they propose, so that when we go back in and recalculate it based on current conditions, it just exponentially jumps up that number. So one of the things and stuff internally that staff has been talking about is as Laura noted and stuff in that, with these increases and stuff in the cost with inflation and everything else, we're going to try, we're going to do our job. But if we come across something that's a really big increase and stuff, we're going to look for alternatives for those operators to try to get things back down to a number that's a little bit more manageable. But in the end, we have our job to do, and we're going to do that. But just so the board's aware, we're conscious of what's going on in the world right now, and we're going to try our best and stuff. But sometimes, literally, our operators dig deeper holes than they can fill. So we have to take that into account. So with that, we're done for today.
Good. Well, thank you, everyone. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All right. Second? I'll second it. Okay. All
Thanks,
right. Well,
all.
thanks, everyone. We will, sounds like, physically see you, at least those of you on the board, in our newly renovated audio working headquarters in July. Thanks, everyone. Have a good rest of your day.
Take care.
Everybody.
Thanks, everyone.